the first song of the album, for example, if this is the first song of the album, for example, this could take a long time. This is a 12 and a half minute long song. If we add a flag here for the start and the stop, which of course I've got it zoomed way out here, so let's quick drag this over. Just from the start and the stop point of what I have here to this point right here. This is just shy. It's 11:58 point. It's 11.58.993 whatever. It's just shy of 12 minutes long. Not the If you listen to the kind of music I listen to, like progressive rock and progressive metal and stuff like that, you'll know this is not atypical. It's not like every song is this long, but this is definitely not the longest song in the world, but it's easily longer than most. Most pop music will end before the 5 minute mark. I always ranked it like this. Short songs were anywhere between 1 second, which, yes, believe it or not, there are songs that are only 1 second long. Most of them are like grindcore songs, but that's neither here nor there. From 1 second to about 2.5 minutes, roughly 2.29 minutes, 2 minutes and 29 seconds is a short song. Okay. Any song that's shorter than that, that's a pretty short song. Okay. You might have a full length song there, but it's still a pretty short song. You're going to just get that very little bit. A lot of songs from the 30s and the 20s and the 40s and the 60s and the 50s, completely numerically in order, of course, are going to be this kind of length because the medium by which they recorded to, those old wax cones and old vinyls, they only had so much length on them. They only had so much time to them. So as a limitation of the medium, there was really not much there that they could do. So, oh, hey, Jeremy, how you doing, man? Glad you could make it. Thanks for coming by. So, these older songs were only so long. Like I said, short length, 2.5 minutes or shorter. Put my link in the host. I could try that. I have to get rid of my camera to do that. Let me see. On FBG. Let's see here. Boy, I don't know how to do that. I'm so terrible with these with these newfangled smartphones. Here we go. Let's try this. Okay, so there's Facebook. I gotta find open up my internet here. You think it's worth starting over? I kind of just went ahead and started because I wasn't really sure if anyone would actually show up. Hey, well, look at that. Look at that. I'm watching my own stream. How crazy is that? Boy, it doesn't have a link. Is there a way to put a link? Oh, here we go. Here we go. Here we go. Copy. Yeah. Thanks for the input there, buddy. I wouldn't have thought to do that. Hopefully it'll work. Hey, look at that. Many hands makes light work. I started drinking early, and now I can't spell. I'll be good for the stream, but I started drinking early, and now I can't spell. All right, let's get back to business. All right, so basically, I was just discussing um, the fundamental beginnings of like mixing and why it's kind of important. And I had gotten sidetracked, as I do, basically on the idea of not only song length, but just like really why mixing is important for any kind of studio recording, because ultimately, um, like a live experience is great. Don't get me wrong. Seeing a band live is a wonderful experience. I've seen lots of bands live. I've seen you guys live, actually, Mister Sutherland, and you guys were great. But the thing that I would love to hear the most is a properly mixed album, because that's where you guys are going to be at your absolute peak. You're going to have your best takes for the recording. You're going to have your best vocal takes, rock guitar takes, your drum takes. Everything's going to be at its peak, with special effects to brighten it up. Maybe not necessarily in studio effects. Maybe it's guitar effects, but whatever. Tom Morello always talks about how like his sound is made with his pedals and not in studio. Like he never uses studio effects. And that's cool. Don't get me wrong. There's nothing wrong with that. But the nice thing about having a studio at your hands is you can do a lot to mold and shape the sound of what it is you're doing. So, mixing will help with that. And it's, you know, it's a combination of a lot of things. A lot of people think mixing is something really simple, like just adjusting volumes and, you know, taking one of these little sliders here and just moving it up or down, or this little guy here, at least in Studio One. In other programs like Pro Tools or Logic Pro, that might be a different slider. But for the most part, you're going to have sliders that allow you to move left to right. So for example, if we solo this track here, this is a clean guitar track, you should be able to hear, and let me know if you can't, this kind of chugging rhythm thing here. If I take this and move it all the way to the left, now you hear it there, now you hear it there. And all of this stuff is pretty cool at face value, but the importance of it is how it defines not only the sound of the band, the sound of the song, but also, really more importantly, your sound as a band, which might sound a little ridiculous to say after I said the sound of the band and all that. But what I mean by that is your sound as a group can be defined by a lot of things. I've played in a number of bands where we had a really unified sound. And some of that was because you had similar instrumentation. Some of that was because everyone just agreed on the sound that they had. But ultimately, the sound of the band comes not only from the effects pedals or even the instruments you're playing, but from the players involved. And for the most part, bands are just made up of people. And one of the good but also kind of tragic things about bands is that people come and go. So you can have a band like Korn, who has been effectively the same members for their entire career, with only a couple of changes here or there, if any. Or you can have a band like Megadeth, where the only real constant member of the band is Dave Mustaine, the lead guitar, well, I shouldn't say the lead guitar, but one of the lead guitar players and the lead vocalist of the band. The drummer, they've gone through like 6 or 7 different drummers. He's been through technically 3 different bassists, although Dave Ellefson has been there for most of the band's career. And as far as other guitar players, don't even get me started. Like there was even a point in time where they didn't even have another guitar player. And when you consider that, you realize that it's going to sound really bad, that people can be expendable in the sound of a band. However, there are some bands where that sound is absolutely integral. Korn is actually a great example of this. When they lost their band member Head, or Brian Welch is his actual name, they had to literally replace him. And when I say they had to literally replace him, they never got another guy to just stand in for him. The person who played his guitar parts in live settings just stood in the back. You never saw his face. You never saw who he was. He didn't stand up front with the rest of the band. He stayed in the back because the band knew that their sound was defined by having these 2 different guitars. And because they didn't really have like solos or like really predominant lead guitar parts that were very prominent, separate from what the music was, it was defined by having these 2 guitars. So when Head came back, it was like, oh my God, for every Korn fan that was out there that was like, oh my God, thank you, finally. This was a huge piece. On the other hand, their drummer, David Silveria, was replaced by drummer Ray Luzier at some point, before the it was either before or just after the See You on the Other Side album. And that could have made a huge difference, but it didn't make as much of a difference as losing that second guitar player would have. Having only one guitar after having years of two guitars was a huge and very significant difference. Now, this is not to say that Ray Luzier is better or David Silveria is better. That's all preference. You're going to have people who like one thing or another. I'm sure there are people out there who like Korn with Ray, but prefer it with David. And I mean, there's people out there who don't think Korn is any good past their first two albums. So the reality is, it's always going to be preference. Ultimately, in the end, there's not a definitive to music, truly, but a band sound is truly defined in a lot of ways by how they interact as people and how they make that sound collectively. And a lot of that is from the people. But one thing that helps, that can really shape it, is your mix. And where that comes from is in your mix, like I said, you'll have something like the clean guitar track or a distorted guitar track, and you might have those separate, you might have those one and the same. In my case, I have them separate because I recorded my guitar what we call DI, or direct in. And direct in basically means I plugged my guitar all but directly into the computer. Now, Jeremy, I know you do this you're kind of half in between. You have the Helix, if I recall, system where you plug into a pedal and then that pedal direct in to whatever sound system, or in your case for recording, I would assume you guys directly plugged into the computers. I don't know that for sure. You can correct me if I'm wrong. But the Helix system allows you that amp model sound. It allows you to kind of coordinate your sound before it goes into the computer. And the nice thing about that is you can find that really dialed in guitar tone that some people would have through an amp, that some people would have through a different kind of pedal, not necessarily the Helix or so. And the nice thing about that is you have, like I said, you have that dialed guitar tone and you can really make sure that it sounds the way you want it. But the one downside to that, I use a Helix Native, which is a DI plugin, so I can always change the sound. Oh yeah. So this actually is kind of what I'm talking about. So with your DI plugin, that allows you to change the sound, and that's a great thing. Had you just, for example, used your Helix pedal and then run that direct in, your sound would have to be remixed within the program, in this case Logic, in order to keep it true to what you're expecting to hear. And that makes a little bit more work for the mixing engineer, for the sound engineer that's trying to make your sound as much to what you want. Whether it's a punchy sound or a softer sound, more ambient, whatever sound you're going for, it puts a little bit more work on their plate as a result. But what I'm working with, just slightly different, I'm doing direct in. Literally the only pedal, and I'll actually go ahead and just show you here, that I've got here is my tuner pedal, my little Boss chromatic tuner, And the benefit of that is I have a almost purely clean, sorry for the handprint, purely clean tone. And the benefit of that is I can kind of adjust it however I want. The downside is if I want a really specific tone, I have to literally recreate it in my DAW. That makes sense. You basically save a preset. And the nice thing about having a preset is that's something you can load from any point into any place. The downside is if you want something even slightly different, you're going to have to make some adjustments. And that's totally fine. Like any mixing engineer will tell you that's something you have to do anyways. For example, on this song, I'm going to be using not necessarily presets per se, but I have, of course, this is the last song on the album that I have to mix. So I've got a lot of stuff that I've already mixed. I'm going to be able to set it up based on what I've already done. And the benefit of that is that I've already got some kind of space to work with. And the nice thing is that because I have that, I have a jumping off point. That'll help to decrease the amount of time I'll have to spend on it. Um, but it'll also give me a point where I can be like, well, you know what? This doesn't work as well for this song. You know, maybe I don't want some chorus on the clean guitar. I want it to just be a clean guitar sound. So I can nix that or add a little bit more if I decide. And in your case, I'm sure you guys have run into that plenty. You guys have been writing a bunch of songs. I've been seeing the updates on Facebook, and I gotta say, I'm so fucking excited. Like, not to completely derail this, but I'm so fucking excited for your guys' stuff. You guys are teasing so much, and I both love and hate you for it. But know that I still love you either way. I'm looking forward to it. I think I got a little confused with Grady's last post. He was holding his guitar in kind of a funky way, and as a joke, I was like, "That's not how you play guitar." And he was like, "What's the Viking strategy?" And it occurred to me after I already posted, like, "Oh, hold it like a battle axe." He kind of already was, so it's just like, "Oh, what have I done? I haven't even met this poor guy," and he's like, "Who's this asshole who's telling me how to play guitar?" But I'm sure, all in good fun. I'm sure he's not like fucking mad at me or anything, but who knows? I don't know. I don't know the guy. Maybe he is really mad at me. I'm going to meet him. He's going to be like, I'll fucking kill you, man. To be fair, I have a hard time believing that you and Chris would work with the guy if he was like that. Like, just fucking, I was going to say he's all, yeah, of course, of course. I have to imagine you guys wouldn't work with a guy who was like, he said a stupid thing. I'm going to punch him in the face. You guys just don't strike me as those kinds of people. But, nonetheless, mixing is a part of the process. And something I was actually talking to a friend about the other day is, the nice thing about this process is it reveals the band's sound even better, I think, than live performance does. Live, you can really craft like an image, right? And some bands really get into their image and they headbang and they move around a lot. Like Sum 41. You ever see Sum 41 play live? Even nowadays, after years of doing it, they still move around. They're all over the place. You remember when we went to Disrupt Tour? That's where I fucking met you guys. You and Sean when he was still part of the band. Sum 41 were all over the place. Hell, even the Used actually put on a pretty good show. I'm not a big fan of the Used music, but they put on a pretty fucking good show. And they were all over the place. And that's a very different dynamic, say, from a band like Radiohead, who's really, really stiff, right? Or Pink Floyd. If you ever see Pink Floyd live, they are as stiff as can be. And in fact, the drummer once said he got approached by a fan where the fan said, "Hey, you guys are so stiff live. Why don't you just replace yourselves with robots?" And his response was, "No, they're too lively." And that's really, I think, that really speaks volumes to like how stiff, but aware of it, aware of how stiff they were as a band. And, there's nothing really wrong with that. But like for me personally, when I play live, I jump and I jump around and I play and I headbang and I get onto it because it's just so fun for me. But here's the thing. Even the best sounding bands live don't have that sound truly dialed in like they do on the studio. And it's not because they're not trying, and it's not because they do a bad job. You hear Pink Floyd live, and it's virtually indistinguishable from the album because they just have that shit dialed in. But the reality is when you play live, you can't make mistakes because you're taking the best takes. There are no, or if there are mistakes, they're there on purpose. They're there because you wanted those mistakes there because, man, that gave that part character. I played this one lick and it was kind of a rough lick, but man, it gave that part character. It made it feel kind of raw. Exactly. If they just sound exactly like they do on the album, it's fine. It's cool that they can reproduce it, but it feels kind of dull, which is why a lot of bands don't do it. Yeah, that's very true. Megadeth is a very well practiced band. and they are really precise with their music. And part of that is actually, believe it or not, um, bred from Dave Mustaine's time in Metallica. Um, Megadeth is a great band. I love their sound. I love their music. Don't always agree with some of the stuff Dave says outside of the band, but that's neither here nor there. But Mustaine um, basically learned how to play guitar. He was a really good guitar player, but he got better because Metallica, after they not even just fired him, but abandoned him at a bus stop before hiring Kirk Hammett, they basically told people he couldn't play guitar, that he wasn't a good guitar player. And you can hear it on the very first Megadeth album, if you ever go and listen to it. Every guitar solo, somewhere in there, he starts laughing. He starts, he does this goofy Dave Mustaine laugh. And, Dave Mustaine's already got a, you know, kind of goofy voice to him. Yeah. Hello, me. Meet the real me in my misfits way of life. Exactly. It's a big fuck you to Metallica. It's a big show-off move. And don't get me wrong, Dave Mustaine is a phenomenal guitar player. He's truly a legendary guitar player. And I would argue he's better than what Metallica are capable of on a technical level. But musically, the problem is he becomes really stiff. If you ever see Megadeth play live, they don't move around very much. They don't headbang. They don't rock out. They're kind of just like focusing on what they're doing. Meanwhile, Metallica's all over the stage. They've got lights going. They've got the stage collapsing around them. One show that happened some years ago, James Hetfield was walking around and he literally fell into the stage. It had an exactly. They're night and day. And James Hetfield fell into the stage. It was like an elevated part of the stage where they could bring props and stuff out, and it had dipped down and he didn't notice, and he turned around and he fell in. Motherfucker just got back up and kept playing. And I think he talked about it later, like, I actually bruised bones, like he almost broke a limb doing it, but he just completely ignored it. He just kept going because he was so amped up. And this is a guy in his like late 50s going on his 60s. Like, this is not not an old dude, but he's not a young dude either. So it's really speaks volumes to the differences between what you'll get on a studio performance versus a live performance. And a live performance is great and it's a fun experience, but the thing about live performance is, yeah, there you go. I love James Hetfield too. And as I get older, Metallica it's hard for me because apart from Slayer, all the big three, the big four, I should say, Anthrax, Megadeth, and Metallica have a huge influence on me as my younger self. But as I get older, I move more and more towards the stuff that inspired this album. And while I still hold Metallica, Megadeth, and Anthrax in high regard, they all have their ups and downs for me. Anthrax is my favorite, personally, only because, one, Scott Ian, who, like James Hetfield, he's just kind of a badass. He's a goofy fucking dude. He's a great guy. But also because Anthrax was always just about having a good time. They were always about having fun. It was never just political messages. It was never just like, we want to fucking piss people off. We're just here. They sing, like, Megadeth has 1 or 2 or 3 songs about comic book characters. Half of an album that you get from Anthrax is literally just about being at a metal show. Like, it's, it's a madhouse, oh, so they claim, like, it's just so goofy. Like, they're just goofy as fuck. And, no ulterior motives. They just want to have a good time. Megadeth is great for that technical skill. But, again, you've got Dave, peace, sales. He's got that goofy voice, so it's not easy for people. And then James Hetfield, I would argue, is one of the better of the vocalists. He's got a great voice. And the music Metallica made was really, like, classically inspired, thanks in no small part to their bassist, Cliff Burton, at the time in their early formation, that kind of resonated throughout their material, because you can hear that even in later stuff. Hell, in their newest live album, they did another S&M album where they actually, on the second half of the show, performed a number of classical tunes. Rather than doing the traditional metal songs, they actually performed a number of classical songs, pieces, I should say, that the orchestra actually picked specifically, which I haven't listened to it yet, but I'm actually pretty excited for that, because that's just kind of like, oh, Fuck yeah, dude. Because classical music, I mean, I believe metal works with just about anything, but metal and classical music is definitely one of those things that's just like, oh, I love it. It's super, super cool. So, way off topic, trying to get back on topic. So, mixing is an important part of all of this. And actually, speaking of those big four, a perfect example of what I'm talking about is we'll just use Metallica as an example. Listen to Metallica's first four albums, particularly Ride the Lightning, Master of Puppets, and Justice for All. Ride the Lightning and Master of Puppets were very close, very similar. You could almost argue that Master of Puppets was a part two of Ride the Lightning in a lot of ways. It was a little bit more progressive in that there were some longer songs and longer song structures, but the mix was almost exactly the same. You could hear a song on Master of Puppets on Ride the Lightning, and you wouldn't think to you wouldn't think anything of it. You wouldn't even probably notice on average. Most people wouldn't even notice. But if you were to take that same logic and apply it to some of their later albums, we'll say even just Injustice for All, where the bass was so low in the mix and it sounds so thin as a result. Like the bass exists, it's there. The fucking Jason Newsted did record bass for the album, but you can't hear it. And even though Fleming Rasmussen, their mixing and their mixing engineer, their producer at the time, was involved with all of that, there just wasn't a whole lot he could do because the band was so tumultuous. I'm completely destroying that word. Tumultuous as a result of breaking apart with Cliff Burton after his passing. So there was a lot of problems there. And so that album, although it's got a lot of great music on it, that album sounds better performed live because you can fucking hear the bass parts. You can hear fucking Jason Newsted actually plucking away at his strings, or whoever is playing bass at that given time. You can't hear it on the album, though. It's really hard. And in fact, it's given rise to a lot of YouTubers who have come out and actually put together some new mixes of the album, or even just re-recorded bass parts to give them a little more boost. So the mix is really important to the sound of a band. You don't think about it much as a band, especially if you're a smaller band, because you kind of think, well, recording is this big deal. You're going to spend a lot of money trying to record something professionally. So you kind of do the best you can. But a mix like what I've got here is absolutely integral to the sound of the band. And I promise you, if you disagree, the evidence is really there. And the way I would suggest to think about it is name a band that you've never heard apart from a local band, like name a professional band, whoever it is, that you've only ever seen live, but you've never listened to any of their albums, and tell me if you remember what they sound like live, but not what they sound like in studio. You know, there's so many bands that we listen to on a regular basis. You don't listen to their live albums. You don't listen to recordings of them live. You listen to their studio recordings, you know, whether it's a popular band like Nickelback or Creed, well, not Creed so much anymore, but Nickelback or, well, Metallica. Fair enough. But, you know, you listen to a band and, like, that's true. They do have a lot of live stuff. And a lot of that is because they have a lot of bootleg live stuff, and they've always, well, I shouldn't say always, but they've almost always promoted bootlegging live shows. That was actually a big part of why people called them sellouts back in the day, is because the idea of the band making money off of their live stuff and making videos and stuff was just kind of like, oh, how dare they? But it's like, dude, a whole nother story for another day. But regardless, most bands, for sure, and I would actually argue even Metallica to a degree, but, you know, to each their own. Again, there's no real right or wrong here. But in most cases, you don't think... Yes, yeah. I mean, you don't think about a band's live material, you think about their studio stuff. And a lot of that comes from the fact that that's what you're hearing most of the time. If you listen to radio, 90% of the time, I would actually argue 95% of the time, you're hearing studio recordings. How many times have you heard Tool live on the radio? It's not that they don't play live. They've played live a whole bunch, but damned if you're hearing any of that on the radio. Korn plays live all the damn time. Again, how much of that are you hearing on the radio? Metallica, even. They play live more than most bands do. Metallica has been on a consistent tour since they released their last album. In this case, it was Hardwired to Self-Destruct. And they did the same thing with Saint Anger and Death Magnetic. They went on tour and just continued to play live for years and years and years. And not even like, oh, we took some break. We took like a week off here or there. Like it's pretty ridiculous how much Metallica plays live. But even despite that, when you think of a band, you think of their studio recordings first and foremost. And everyone's going to have their own individual. In your case, Jeremy, you think of them with their live stuff over their studio stuff. I've never gotten to see Metallica live in person. I have a couple of their live shows on DVD, including the Big 4 DVD/Blu-ray, which is really fucking cool. If you get a chance, if you haven't seen that, that's worth it just because it's kind of cool to see the Big 4 of thrash metal all playing a show together. Not like literally together, but like together. That was just kind of a cool, like, I would hope someday they could do it again, but with Slayer having retired from playing live, it's kind of like, eh. And honestly, I'm okay with that. Never been a big Slayer fan, but that's a personal thing. But even live shows have a mix. And that mix is absolutely integral to the sound that you hear. If you just went out and played live, you could have all kinds of stuff go wrong. Which is why when you hear a band play like a demo, it doesn't sound the same, even if it's exactly the same structure. Even if it's all the same parts, it doesn't sound the same as what you'll get on the album. And a lot of that comes from the mix. Typically, a demo is just, we recorded the band playing through their song, or we recorded the band as they put their parts together, they put the song together, and here it is. Just straight up. No mix, no adjustments, nothing. And there's nothing wrong with that. In fact, that's a great way to get your music out there. If I have not, but I will. I'll be digging into it here in just a second. I got sidetracked. I apologize. I do that. I'm sure you've spoken to me before, and you know how it goes. I also think you're the only guy here, which is fine. Like, I'm okay with that. At least somebody's here. It's not just me all alone. I've been drinking. So, I do have 2 viewers. Well, that's pretty cool. Well, whoever the other viewer is, thank you for coming along. I didn't realize. I can't actually tell from my setup because I actually pretty specifically was told not to have a viewer count set up for OBS because because it can be really demoralizing to only see like you don't have it, to see you have no viewers. But it's cool that I have 2, so that's awesome. Does it mess up? I don't think so. It's just when you're I was told that when you're streaming, if it looks like you don't have anybody there, it can be really demoralizing, and it can make you kind of go like, well, why am I even doing this? You know, I don't know that it would really bother me. I mean, I started this under the presumption that no one was going to be here, so this is already 2 people better than what I was expecting. So to start with, I have actually played a little bit of the song, and I'm going to play it again. But I want to just quick state. Oh yeah. It's all good. So the important thing, ultimately, that I think to start with, before I really get into the mix, and sorry for anyone who was here for that, for a lot of that, I get easily sidetracked, and I apologize. And thank you, Jeremy, for being here and chatting with me. But as you pointed out, let's get to the song. So the first thing I want to bring up is, before you get started with mixing, you want to figure out that first and foremost, is mixing something you want to get into? And I bring that up only because this right here might sound fine to you. Let me know if you can't hear it. This part on its own, I'm going to turn this down just a little bit. might sound good to you as is. And some of that comes from, got the bass in there, got some extra guitar. Some of that comes from the fact that I already have a little bit of a premix here. But you might also realize that the problem, oh, thank you. That you might also realize that the problem with it is it also sounds a little bit like it's empty. Now, some of that is because there's just not a lot going on. But some of that is, if you actually look, a lot of my stuff is already kind of preset. This is literally how I recorded these tracks. When I went and recorded the guitar parts, this is how it sounded. I had these effects all lined up already in here. I had this room, I don't know if I can zoom in at all here. Yeah. So I had this room reverb, this Pro EQ, this limiter, this expander, all of this, a lot of this stuff was already there when I initially started recording. And the benefit of that was I kind of already knew going in what it was going to sound like. Sorry for the screwy movement there. I apologize. There we go. Okay. The benefit of that is I kind of had an idea what I was getting myself into as I was recording. Not everyone's going to like that. In fact, most musicians will tell you that they're happy to just record their parts and leave it to somebody else. And that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. I know plenty of musicians, even back in Alaska, we had friends when I was in Thunderfish or Transitions, we had friends who they didn't get involved with the mixing process or the production process at all. Not a little bit. We basically we recorded our parts, we walked away from it, we paid our money, we paid our dues and let someone else deal with it because, or if we had a say in it, we had a say in it once we kind of heard after the fact. Because it is a long and arduous process. The first Thunderfish song on its own took about 32 hours to mix. Now, subsequent songs, of course, that time diminished because you have a working mold from that point on. But not everyone's willing to waste a day and a half, fucking around with one goddamn song. Like, it's just not a thing. Now, personally, if it's audio based, I love it. Like, I just love this stuff. And I have so much fun with it. The last song I did was another longer song like this. It was about 11 minutes long. And I woke up about the time I would wake up to go to my normal 8-hour, we'll say 10 to 6 job overnight. I had taken the night off because it was a particularly rough night. And I basically said, I'm not going to work today because, oh, for sure. But even a good engineer can take a long time. We actually sent our mixes to professional engineers that have been doing it for a very long time. That's why it's part of why it took so long, I think, is our recordings weren't necessarily all that great. We found out later why our recordings weren't all that great, but a good mix, it varies from person to person. A good mix can take a long time. It can be a real short amount of time. It also just depends on a lot of elements. How many tracks you have in a song. For example, you might notice between this track and this track, I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, and then the master track over here on the far right. And so if we count the master track, that's 16 different tracks. And that's a lot for the kind of song this is, right? And you can tell, you may not be able to read it as well, but if you look, a lot of that, in fact, from here down to here, that's all vocal tracks. Not a lot of bands. Well, I shouldn't say not a lot of bands. A lot of bands have a lot more. A lot of bands have a lot less. It's just going to depend on your sound. It's actually pretty simple. You guys probably have a lot more because you also have a lot of synth stuff going on. I also don't know. Do you guys do a lot of like sampling in your sounds? And I don't mean like literal sampling, like lifting pieces from other songs, but do you guys have like sound samples or sound clips in your songs? Because in Studio One, at least, when I record a different part, I record different parts all on the same track. So I have something like this part here is labeled as Guitar Distortion 3. This is Guitar Distortion 4. These are all different takes of like a similar part. So I guess it just depends. I've heard of people like, I don't know if you're familiar with Jacob Collier. He'll have like 600, 700 tracks on some of his songs. And a lot of it is like just a short piece here or there. Like, oh, I really like the sound of this particular bell. And I really wanted that. So he recorded me hitting this bell at this one part. I don't know if that's how you guys do it. The trick with me is I have a much simpler setup also. I've only got a couple guitar parts that I recorded. Granted, before the end of this, we will have at least one other track on here. And some of that is because at this point, I'm not going to go back and re-record stuff. I plan to for the next album. I'm going to record more guitar parts for the next album. But for this one, I've taken a little bit of a shortcut, but just a small one. And that's just to fill out the sound a little more. And that is this guitar part here. On some of the songs, I've had to double it. And that's because going back and re-recording it is kind of a waste of time at this point. It's just not necessary. I don't know if I'm going to do it with this song specifically. I have done it for a few of the songs. Physical was not one of them. But the next single was. And you might hear it. There's a little bit of not a phase, but you can hear that it sounds like the guitars fill out the back end of the far left and the far right. And that's because I doubled those guitar parts. And my intention with the next album is to actually just record those guitar parts separately and really just write more guitar parts. No. And that's because I wrote these when I approached this album, what I did is I wrote the guitar parts based on stoner rock, stoner metal type music, which is really kind of simple and straightforward kind of music in how it's played. Not necessarily structurally, but just like the guitar parts are really repetitive and long. And that was a big influence for some of the guitar stuff for this. So I wrote a lot of the album with only one or two guitar parts in mind. And I realized later that while that works, it wasn't quite everything I wanted. Which is why I say in the coming album, I'm going to do more. I'm probably going to end up with like at least 3 different guitar parts, if not more. And some of that is because I chose to really simplify it. Another part of that is I don't know what all 40 to 60 tracks you guys have. But I assure you by the end of this, at least from my perspective, I don't think it needs any more tracks. Anything else would be kind of extra. In fact, the only thing I think that's missing from this is I did a little like squealy thing that I don't think is in here. Where I kind of, I don't know if you'll hear this. I did like a scream into the microphone. And, right. And I promise, we will play it. But yeah. So, one thing I will tell you, we're not going to necessarily play it all the way through right away, but we are going to play this chunk here. Seeing as we were already just about there. So right here, the drums kick in. And this is roughly what you're going to hear for a lot of this song. Now, as you can see, this is not properly mixed. The drums are a little quiet. is actually really quiet. Bass is actually really a bit high. So, as a continuation is what I started to say, you want to make sure mixing is right for you. One of the aspects of that is what DAW you're using. As you can see, as you can maybe see, I'm using Studio One, version 4, but you could easily use version 3. And as you can see, there's a pretty good amount of stuff here, even just for 16 channels. I know it's not impressive as compared to 40 to 60. Humble brag on your part, but but as you can see, there's a pretty good amount here, and all of this stuff, like I said down here, all the blue stuff leading into the white is all vocal stuff. I love vocal layers, and that's a big thing for me. Oh, no, of course not. I'm just giving you a hard time, dude. Music is not a competition. And honestly, I've never even thought of it, even like Battle of the Band stuff. It's always been like, whoever wins, good on them. Because like, how do you really judge that stuff? It's really got to be up to the people who are just kind of figuring it out. But so the first and foremost thing that I like to do when I'm mixing a song is I like to import everything over. Oh, yeah. I don't know. I don't honestly know. It's hard to say. Like I said, I look at some guys who have like hundreds of tracks in their music, and it is like that in and of itself is impressive. Like I said, Jacob Collier, I forget, was it I can't remember the name of the song now. Jacob Collier. If you don't know who that is, Jacob Collier is like a world music, pop music guy. He's won 3 or 4. He's won a number of Grammys, if that matters. And he's a very talented guy. He's one of those with perfect pitch. He's a musician's musician. And he uses a lot of tracks when he makes a song, like a number of tracks, and it's ridiculous. But he also makes kind of popularized music, and when you're making that kind of music, a lot of tracks is almost absolutely necessary in order to make those really specific sounds. Personally, I don't know that I'll ever make a song with that many fucking tracks on it, because to me it's just not necessary. I can get what I've got. Let's see if I can find a particularly complex part. Here's a little bit more of a complex part. There's like a death metal part in this song here. Here we go. Here's one. So at some point in this song, we revert to a 7/8 time signature, and that becomes the standard for a big part of the song. At this point in the album's story, our lead protagonist is now being shown his childhood at his parents' home. Yeah. And with gang vocals, especially if you want to do individual gang vocals, they stack up quick. Especially if you're doing a lot. One way to alleviate that, if you're looking to alleviate it, is just having a bunch of people standing around a microphone going, we did that on one song. I think it was called Rocket Song. I think it was Rocket Song. We did it on the Thunderfish album, which you can find at Bandcamp, believe it or not. There was a song on there we did called Rocket Song. It was actually the first song I wrote with the band after joining them. And on that song, there's a part where there's a number of parts where we have gang vocals. And we just had like 5-6 guys standing around a microphone just shouting. Now, personally, if I were to do that now, like Leviathan, obviously that was just me. So it stacks. Like there's like 5 vocal parts there because I shouted a bunch of stuff over and over and over again in kind of different ranges, watch and learn, whatever the circumstances are. But in a song like this, like probably the most expansive vocal parts is right at the end here, where you get like this 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 vocal part, where you've just got like 8 different voices all stacked on top of each other, and that'll happen. In fact, vocals, I would argue, is probably the easiest thing to stack, because it's real easy to get a whole bunch of stuff. You get your doubling, you get your harmonies, you get your like you say, your gang vocals, where it's not quite doubling, but it's not quite harmonies either. Octaves, all sorts of stuff, or even just weird vocal stuff, like if you have someone in the back going, like making goofy noises. In the context of a song, that can fit. Like, maybe it sounds goofy, but maybe it works. Who knows? There's a part in here where this is actually one of the few songs where the death growl stuff that I can do is an integral part, and I'll play that here in a second. But there's a particular section here where we like I said, we move into it's so amazing. It's so amazing once you get into it. But there's a particular section here where we're going to 7/8, and the guy is looking at his home. And at this point in the story, he's being shown it, basically, to put it simply, as I quote from one of my own songs, excuse me, it's a view from the afterlife. Think like Charles Dickens' A Christmas Story. He's being shown this stuff from an outside perspective. He's involved, literally, but he's being shown it from an outside perspective. He's not being shown it from his own eyes. He's seeing it from the perspective of people who aren't him. And so we get this part that everything kind of comes to a soft, and he's here this. After that all culminates, it busts into a pretty standard 4/4 rhythm, and we get this chuggy part. As you can hear, this lead part here is just a little loud. I want to keep it, but it's a little loud. This is supposed to represent our main character's parents. And throughout the story, our main character is living an abusive life. And the abuse has come from a lot of different places. But in this particular song, we see that his own parents are part of that abuse. And they are represented, like I said, by these death growly parts. And these are, there's one that's like a, really guttural, like you'd hear it in deathcore stuff, like where it's like, I think they call those breeze or something like that. But there's also a part, if I solo these, you can kind of hear there's a little bit of a difference. One is that low part, like I said. But the other one is a little bit more middle range. It's like a go, run high. And at face value, there's not a lot here. By the time you hear the song, when it's all said and done, it'll sound a lot more epic. And that's a lot of the mixing process. So, like I said, my DAW of choice in this case is Studio One. Some people use Logic Pro. I've heard some people use Ableton. A lot of it depends on what kind of music you're making. Studio One is great for this sort of stuff. this like rock and metal stuff because it's really good. You have one button press on a PC, which is pretty unusual. Nah, I shouldn't say it's unusual. Pro Tools technically had it, but on a PC, some stuff can be a little bit more difficult. On Mac, it's a lot more user friendly. Um, and with a DAW that's really user friendly on PC, I'm like, ha ha, yes, yes, please. So Studio One is that for me. With a Mac, you're gonna find that a lot of stuff is a little bit more user friendly in general. And that's not really a Mac versus PC. You should do it this way or that way. It's just kind of just up to what you want to do, whatever you have available. Pro Tools is the studio standard, but that does not necessarily mean Pro Tools is what's right for you. And part of that comes to cost. If you know anything about Pro Tools, Mac or PC based, oh man, Pro Tools is not your friend. It is not cheap. It's designed for professional studios, and it's a great program. I've used it before. I interned at a studio when I was in high school. And it's a great program, but I personally, I couldn't afford Pro Tools. I'd have to save up quite a bit actually at this point. Woof. I'd have to save up actually quite a bit if I wanted to use Pro Tools like they have in the studios. Now, that's not to say there aren't cheaper versions of it or more affordable editions of it, but at face value, it can be distinctly more difficult to get into. Other programs like Ableton, like I said, Studio One, the one I'm using, or the one I used for years, Fruity Loops or FL Studio, those can be more affordable. FL Studio is really great if you're looking to make electronic music. And if you've ever gone to my SoundCloud and listened to the Jupiter Storm stuff, all of that was made in FL Studio and older versions of FL Studio that were still referred to as Fruity Loops. And that's all really integral to what FL Studio and Fruity Loops really had available. I don't know that I would have made that stuff in Studio One as readily because Studio One is a lot more about recording. Not to say it can't do that kind of music. As you can see, my drum track here is still a step sequencer. It's still a piano roll. You know, although I love this part. Here we go. This just cracks me up. Having the drums play up here is just a cool, fun thing for me. I can get lost in that for hours, but I'm not going to do that because just because I can doesn't mean you can't. But the thing about it is being able to program those drums. I knew how to do that because of FL Studio. So it made it real easy for me to just go through and figure out. Oh, you don't need Easy Drummer because you got fucking Steve. And Steve's a phenomenal drummer. But if ever you needed to fill out that space, Easy Drummer is great. It uses actual live drum sampling from real players. This particular kit that I'm using has a mix of samples from Thomas Hake of Meshuggah and Dirk Verburen, who is... Okay, fair enough. Superior Drummer is actually made by the same company, Tune Tracks, who did Easy Drummer. And Superior Drummer, I don't know if there's a huge difference between them. I really don't, if I'm being completely honest. I haven't done a lot of research into that. But Easy Drummer and Superior Drummer are both great programs. I've heard wonderful things. Tune Track has been my bread and butter through this whole process. And, you know, being able to go in and customize what kind of toms I'm using, what note or pitch they're playing at any given time, what kind of heads they've got, looking at, I know Devin Townsend used Easy Drummer on the Ziltoid album, but I know some other more well-known artists have used Superior Drummer on their stuff. Both are phenomenal programs. And I love the customization available with all of these, samples and what you can do. This particular one, I did a mix mash of different things. I actually have several kits. I've got the modern, the vintage, the metal, and the progressive. I don't know the name of the drummer, unfortunately, but the drummer is the guy who is or was in Carnivool, which is an Australian progressive metal band who they've only got 3 albums, sadly, to their name, but I highly recommend you check them out if you haven't. They're really great. Their first album is like a progressive nu metal sound, and they kind of advanced from there. And their last album, Asymmetry, is something chef's kiss. It's phenomenal. Um, I think they did a video for the song "We Are," so if you ever get a chance, check that out. It's great stuff. But they did a particularly great thing with their sound. You've got the vintage, which is kind of an old school style. You've got the modern, which is just a standard rock kit, and all of those are optional. Like I said, Devin Townsend used this particular kit, which is Drum Kit from Hell, which is the metal drum set. He's got 5 toms and a billion cymbals and double bass drums for his Ziltoid the Omniscient album, and it's a great Superior Drummer, Easy Drummer. If you can get either one of them, they're phenomenal. Highly recommended for me, at least. And they'll get you through everything you're looking for. Whether it's a fast beat, a slow beat, or something like this, where you're just using a hi-hat, or something like this that's really soft. It just depends on what you're going for. You know, these drums, you're going to hear these drums throughout the entire album. So it's important to remember that not only your drum kit, but just your sound overall meshes well. And the drum kit is an important part of that. If you've got a live drummer, that's I would argue, a lot easier to work with. Whereas I've had to adjust quite a bit. When I was initially mixing physical, I ran into that problem where I had to really readjust for my drum sound in conjunction with my guitar and bass sound. So, a big thing about mixing is, like I said, know if it's for you and get the right DAW for you. Being able to adjust stuff at will. Uh-huh. And that makes a lot of sense. Superior Drummer 3, Easy Drummer, like I said, those are both great programs. Um, and yeah, it's super, like I said, with live samples, it's hard to beat. Um, a lot of people kind of like get real uppity about um, electronic drum kit sounds, because especially in like a metal band setting, because you get that sort of like, oh, well, it's going to sound like you're listening to some techno or pop song with the drums. Well, no, these are designed for that very specifically. They're designed to sound like real drums, at least as much as possible. And so that makes a huge impact on the sound of the band. But good on you for actually bringing a drummer in. I don't really have a lot of that luxury here. Mostly just I don't know a lot of people. And the drummer I was working with just randomly stopped talking to me one day, which is a little sad, but shit happens. You move on. But in the case of this, I was already planning to use Easy Drummer. I'd already bought the program along with a lot of different samples. Hey, Chris. Yeah, Superior Drummer is. I've heard really good things. I don't have Superior Drummer myself. I have debated picking it up though, if for no other reason than just because Easy Drummer was such a good program, and TuneTrack has been great. Anytime I've run into problems, they've responded right away. Like it's really awesome. I'm so happy to hear that other people have used this program, even despite the fact that they have, or not necessarily despite the fact, but have used this program in their own stuff. It's uplifting to know other people have kind of a like-minded situation. But the other thing to remember, at least for a personal experience, is I wanted to bring this up because this is something I think a lot of people make a mistake of. In-ear monitors versus headphones like I've got. I highly recommend not using in-ear monitors if you want to preserve your hearing. If this is something that you're interested in getting into, In-ear monitors can damage your hearing if you're not careful. And don't get me wrong, these sort of headphones can, but it because they're around your ears as opposed to right inside of them, it's a little less direct, and that can create a bit of a little bit more of an open air space. Um, I don't know that anyone's gonna necessarily go like, "Oh, in-ear monitors, how dare you? Oh, how dare you?" You know, but who knows? But that's something I would recommend: headphones versus in-ear monitors, and you don't need something super fancy. Just something that allows you to hear a little bit more of the nuance. Good studio headphones are important, no matter what you're doing. So, first and foremost, one of the things I want to bring about is I gotta import all my previously saved settings. So this part is a little bit boring. We just do a lot of copy and pasting, but it does help out. What did I just copy and paste? Analog delay. Here we go. Okay, so as you can see, I've got a number of effects here already lined up. Most of these will probably be pretty much the same, but I want to go through real quick and make sure that I've got all of these set up, because some of these songs, I'm going to stream between now and 7 o'clock, and then at 7 o'clock, which at this point, with all this long intro and stuff, we'll keep going, but at 7 o'clock, if we're not done, I'm going to stop and take a break because I've got other stuff going on. And then I'm going to pick it back up again at midnight, where at that point, I'm just going to go. And I'm just going to go till we're done. Or until I literally can't go anymore. Not like falling asleep on stream, but just till I can't go anymore. So I'll be streaming for most of the day, at least past a certain point. But yeah, so that's my plan, at least as of now. Thank you guys again, by the way, for being in here. I wasn't really expecting to have anybody here, so that's pretty cool. But my plan is, like I said, I'm going to be here till about 7 o'clock. And yeah, absolutely. Do what's right by you, man. I don't have any control of your day. But I am happy that you're here now. I appreciate it. Thank you. Um, and I don't know if I really need to, but I apologize for the long intro. That was like a good hour and 10 minutes of just me basically futzing around. That's the one thing I wish I could fix that about my brain. I just can't. Well, I appreciate it. Thank you guys. It means a lot to me. So that's the clean guitar. So now, well, thank you very much. I appreciate that, especially from you guys. Like you guys are kind of like my connection to like proper pro musicianship here. So it means a lot for me. It means a lot to me that you guys are here. If for no other reason than to have you guys occasionally step in and be like, "Oh, excuse me, sir. Excuse me. But you don't know what you're talking about. We've been doing this for a while." Not even that you guys are like that, but just like there's a certain point where that is the best thing about having friends. Any relationship is built on, I truly believe any relationship is built not on your agreements, but the disagreements and how you get through them. And some of that is not literal disagreements, but how like differences, just differences. You know, you guys, for example, you have a full band, and that in and of itself creates a wholly different dynamic from where I'm coming from, where like literally all of this is just me. It's just me playing the bass, the guitar, and writing the drum parts and singing the song. And that's a wholly different dynamic from having a bunch of people involved. And while I have been there, I've definitely been a part of that. I don't have that now with this stuff. And some of that's on purpose, to be fair. But some of that's also just, it's just different. It offers a different perspective. It's one of the reasons why I do hope to have a band at some point. Oh, I agree. Wholeheartedly, I agree. Seeing Yeah, you know what? You worded it perfectly. Watching the different ways musicians get to the same goal is fascinating to me. I couldn't agree anymore. Like, it's just phenomenal. And I just love all of this process. Even the stuff like this, where it's just kind of like, oh, this isn't exactly all that interesting for most people. Like, what am I doing? I'm just copying and pasting stuff, right? Well, the part of the reason I'm copying and pasting this stuff, though, um, and I'm sure you guys have experienced this as well, because I've already mixed a lot of these songs. So I have a a not a preset per se, but a dynamic to work with. And the nice thing about Studio One, and I think most programs probably have something like this, is that um, I just have this little drop down menu here where I can just switch between songs real easily, make sure I've got the right thing, copy, paste. And this part, like I said, I get it. This part can be a little dull. It's not super fun. But as you can see, little changes make a significant difference. And that's something you learn very quickly. If you've never mixed before and you're just getting into it, you wouldn't necessarily know. But little changes make significant differences. And not just like little changes literally in like effects. Little changes in the volume, little changes in the panning, little changes in what effects you use, how you use them, and even just between two different recordings, you can have a wholly different uh what's a good word? You can have a wholly different mix. Something as simple as, well, like this. You might have noticed I just added an effect to this, the fat channel. This fat channel I added as I've mixed through all of these songs. I have some friends that I've known most of my life. They have collectively, I don't know how that maths out. I'm gonna say each of them has been doing this stuff for at least 20 to 40 years. Um, Professional mixing, studio work, all of it. One of them is a classically trained musician. I think he's at least got very good relative pitch, if not perfect pitch. Um, and the other two were in a band together. They've been performing and doing studio work for 40 odd years. Really expansive knowledge. And what I'll do is I'll make a preliminary mix and then take that and send it off to them and see what they say. And they won't mix anything for me. They don't mix anything for me. They just tell me, they just so, oh, well, the bass is a little loud. Maybe lower the bass. And that's how I'll do it. That's how we got physical, as you've heard it, is I sent my mix off to them. They responded. I remixed a little bit. They responded. I remixed a little bit. And we fine-tuned it until it was just right. And most of these songs, I'm really happy with how a lot of this stuff has come out. And I'm really excited to see how this one turns out, because the last song like this that I did, I only did a few of those. Most of them, it's been like mix 4, 5, 6 before we finally got to a point where it's like, okay, this is the one. That last one, I think we did 3. And it was like, really? Oh, that's it? And they're like, yeah, no, it sounds good. So I'm hoping this ends up like that. But we will see. We will see. So we do one last thing here. Do I really not? How did I manage that? Wow. Okay. Well, that's weird. Something unexpected has occurred. A wild. Oh, do I have it set to test? I don't. That's actually a really good point. But I don't know how. Let's see here. It's called test stream. Of course it's called test stream. Of course it's called test stream. As you can see, this is my first time doing this. And I don't know what I'm doing. I'm going to be honest. I don't know how to change that. If I can change it. Cult of Dead. There you go. There you go. That's actually a really good name. I like that. Boy, I don't... Where? Here we go. Select font. Nope. Okay. Mainstream. File. Show profile folder. Come on now. Nope. Oh man. I don't know if I can change it midstream. Rename. Nope, that's a scene selection. Yeah, you're probably not wrong. Honestly. Well, let's see here. It's weird though. So the program I'm using is OBS, and it seems, from what I understand, purely what I understand, I could be very wrong, and I will never claim to be right on anything. Well, that's not true, but I will never claim to know if I don't know. Properties. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. Of all the things I noticed as I was getting this all figured out, I don't think I noticed that. Well, it looks like you guys are part of test stream. Oh man. Oh, I wish I could figure out how to fix that. Like you said, you're probably right. Honestly, I probably can't. I don't know the ins and outs of this program. Supposedly, this program is what most streamers use. I don't know if it's because it's free or if it's just because it's simple to use. But I've got a buddy who streams. I don't know if he streams on the regular, but he's definitely streamed. I've caught some of his streams, and he absolutely does use OBS. Although he uses a different version of OBS, I guess I found out. So I don't know. We'll figure it out. I think at this point I'm kind of just stuck with what I got. We'll get who we get. Like I said, honestly, I'm pretty stoked that you guys are here, if I'm being completely honest with you. I was actually not expecting much of anybody. So, but regardless, for those of you who tune in later, you might have noticed I opened up another file. That is so I could add this. This is a Pro EQ setting. This is just a basic EQ. A lot of parametric EQs. You have a lot of different channels to work with. You have your lows, your mids and high mids, your highs, and these all affect the different pieces of it. And they're all affected on this wavelength. I'm not great with the technical terms, and I'll admit that wholeheartedly. But the nice thing about it is it allows you to kind of adjust the overall tone and sound of your mix from a perspective. So, as you may recall, we started with one thing, and not a lot has changed, but you might notice some things have changed, at least in the distorted guitar. Ooh, look at that delay. Why is So, and this happens. Sometimes you get a thing going and it sounds right, but it's not. Let's reduce that down. Let's try 10. And this is what I'm talking about. This same delay I use in a different song, and it doesn't have this problem. And a lot of it just ties into different recordings, different sounds. A lot of things can play around with these things, and it just so the clean guitar sounds a little bit nicer now, in my opinion. Now, one thing that I like to do, that I've learned over the years, well, not over the years, but just in the process of mixing this album, actually, I like to move the guitar parts, all of the instruments around. Think of your mix as a soundscape. So your drums can be mixed either from the audience perspective or from the drummer's perspective. Right now, I have it mixed to the drummer's perspective. So your snare is kind of like right here, right in the middle. Your bass drums are kind of like in this general vicinity. Think right-handed drum set. So your hi-hat's kind of over here, and then your cymbals reach up over here and around, right? And your toms starting a little bit, just a hair bit left to center, come around. And that is a really easy way to kind of like figure out where you're at with your mix, like how you're doing. Well, how you're doing is not the right way to put it. More accurately, it's kind of a way to visualize. That's what the word I'm like. Visualize your mix in a very literal way. So, in the case of my guitar for the clean guitar, I want it to be a little bit left. We're going to put it 45 degrees to the left. That's going to put it a little bit off center. It's kind of like right here, you know, or I guess like from here for you, you know, kind of mirror whatever I'm doing. Now that other guitar part, this guitar lead part, I'm going to instead reverse. We're going to put that 45 degrees to the right. So that now swings a little bit out. Now you guys know having the guitars separated is a good way of keeping them distinct from each other. But for those of you who don't know, this is true of pretty much all instruments. That stereo separation, even just between the two channels, can make a huge difference. Not only in what you hear as a musician, but as a listener, right? Going back to a band that a lot of people know about, Metallica, you know, they have two guitar players, and they're constantly playing different parts off of each other. And if you listen, those parts aren't center stage. They're split. If you pan your channels to the right, you're going to hear more of whoever's on the right versus whoever's on the left, and vice versa. And that's again, you guys here in the chat are going to know. That's fairly basic stuff. But for those of you who don't know, that's a good way of not only separating who's playing what part, but in recording studios, in recording, not only recording studios, but recording studio programs, DAWs, as they're called, digital audio workstations. That helps to separate the guitars a little bit so they're not right on top of each other. If everything is center mass, it can really fill up a lot of space. If everything's to the left, it can fill up a lot of space. If everything's to the, you get the idea. So by having them separated a little bit, that spreads them out a little, and it gives them a little more room to breathe, where normally you would not necessarily have that room. Now, personally, I like to keep my drum setup is kind of already mixed thanks to Easy Drummer. One thing we can do, we go here and we do this, because this is from a previous song. We already know that this is going to be a thing. We come and we hit paste. And it's going to take a little minute to load, just a little second. This is, weirdly enough, this is like one of the things, I don't know why it is, but this Studio One takes a hot minute to paste for drums. Everything else is pretty instantaneous, but drums specifically, it takes a hot minute. And this probably won't change much, to be fair. But it will give the drums a little bit of a difference from whatever I had when I initially did this. So yeah, now that's done. And then we'll also go back to knocking at the door here. Knocking at the door? What's he talking about? I don't fucking know. It's another song? Who knows? I don't fucking know. The album's not out yet. This guy's a dick. So we'll go here, and then we'll add in another Pro EQ, and this gives us our not biometric, parametric EQ. We'll paste that, and this ups this low end here between 0 and 50 hertz, and then it lowers it just a little bit right here, and you can see this is kind of a preset that's a little bit adjusted from this Metal Extreme preset. I went through and adjusted these just a little bit, hair bit, lowered the very, very high end, brought up this kind of range in here. And this stuff really helps bring the drums out just a little bit more. Gives them a little bit more of a high range. One thing I also like to do is just a hair. Specifically, we want the bass drum and the snare to feel like they're getting a good punch in there. The cymbals are going to fill out space kind of as they do, and you're not always going to hear them, but you want them to be visible. Okay, and part of that is because cymbals can really take up a lot of sound space just on their own. It doesn't really matter how you mix them. Cymbals are loud. They're just really, really loud, and they fill up a lot of the spectrum. You can have a cymbal like this China crash down here, or this China crash over here. These are two different Chinas. And they've got a lot of different tone to them. And so those sorts of sounds might... yeah, I adjust the velocity within the actual thing here. If I bring it up here, you can see I've got the velocities adjusted up in here. That's one thing. Another thing that I also do is I write the drums based on what I would do as a player. I can play drums. I'm nowhere near, in your guys' case, I'm nowhere near Steve's level. But I can play drums. I actually used to play drums. I had a drum set and I actually did regularly play drums to some degree. And I even played drums for a band very briefly. I say very briefly because I ended up just kind of being a backup guy for like one show. But regardless. And so I have an understanding of how drums as an instrument, or several instruments, if you will, work. So I know that when I write drums, I don't want it to sound like a robot. I don't want it to just sound like it's so on the beat. So one of the things I do personally to make that work is adjusting velocity so that different things sound a little bit better. One example of that is, so here you can kind of see there's a lot of waves in my velocities here. But another thing that does it is my drums are mixed to reach across the stereo spectrum. And then another thing is just what specifically I'm playing. I try to work in unique fills. I try not to just repeat stuff super immediately. So like you get... that little snare hit kind extra bass drum hit right in here adds what I would call like a level of imperfection to it, which is like, it creates the sense that maybe he made a mistake, but we kept it in there, you know? It doesn't sound like he made a mistake, or whoever's playing the drums, he or she. It doesn't sound like they made a mistake, but it almost sounds like it wasn't intended. So you get something like this, you know? And that little ba-ba-ba gives it a little bit more liveliness. Another thing is, a lot of programs like Easy Drummer have what's called a humanize setting. And that setting naturally creates what would I call it? Like a volume deficiency, I guess would be one way of putting it, where no part is played exactly at the same. I could do this for hours and it just sounds like mechanical, but that's not how people do, you know? Even the most masterful professional drummers don't always hit the exact same spot. They might hit a very small area, but they don't necessarily hit the exact same point every single time, or at the exact same velocity, because we are, of course, human, and humans are not perfect. So a humanize setting, if your program has it, can help with that. In this case, a lot of it's velocity. One of the things I've found is, for example, if you have a snare that's like a da, 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 pop, pop, you know, where you have a snare that's hitting off the beat, like this one, move. This little snare here is a little bit lower in the mix. It's a little lower in the volume. And in this particular setting, there's also a couple of different snare hits. The main hit that I use is, they refer to it as a rim shot. That's the tom. So you have this really full pop, pop, you know, where you just, it sounds like you get the full sound of the drum, where that rim shot, you know, pop, pop. But there's other ones like this. And this one's a little softer. You're hitting like right dead center. You're not hitting it with the rim. So instead of getting that full pop, you're getting a little bit of a, you know, and that little is perfect for like rolls, but also for like, if you, so say this is your cymbals, you know, that off kilter, where you're getting that slightly different snare hit. And that can make a lot of difference. So all that absolutely plays into the mix at some point. But in that case, you're talking more about like the playability. And again, with a live drummer, it does become a lot easier because the drummer can kind of figure that shit out for you, if you will. I don't know Steve well enough to know how detail oriented he is about his drumming. Some drummers can really break it down for you piece by piece, and some really just feel it. Neither is right or wrong, and neither implies good or bad. It's just different. I've known drummers who seem like they're really intricate and they're really good, and then you ask them like, dude, what was that fill you did? And they go, I don't fucking know. I just do it. And they just know it off the top of their heads. They can just do it. And it's just going to be different for everybody. Some people can, you know, there's those guys like, you know, guys like Mike Mangini or even Mike Portnoy from Dream Theater. Guys like Nick DiVergio. I can't think of his name. Jojo Mayer. You know, he'll tell you exactly when, where, and how he's hitting his parts. And if you've never heard Nerve or even just Jojo Mayer doing his workshops, truly, this is one of those guys who's like, he makes all the other drummers not necessarily look like garbage, but look like they don't know what they're doing. He's one of those guys. He's one of those. He plays breakbeat, which is typically electronic music that uses fake drums because most humans can't play it. He plays that stuff casually. One of the most impressive things that he does is 3-part polyrhythmic parts on drums. Right hand doing one thing, left hand doing one thing, foot doing another. And ask any drummer. That's like, what the fuck are you talking about? Like, you want me to do what now? And it's all, I mean, anyone can technically do it if they know how to practice it. But it's so much harder to really put it into that practice, to really narrow it down and really focus on that field. So it's definitely something amazing. I am nowhere near that level, even just as a writer. Like, just writing drums, I kind of just do, like, I know I could play this part, so it's going to be what I can play. And I know I can play these parts with enough practice. Steve, if I were to record Steve doing these parts, he'd probably make these parts sound like a billion times better because he's just a better drummer than I am. And that's not even me just gushing as a fan. That's just reality. Like, he's just he's more a drummer than I am because he just does. That's what he does. He's a drummer. And me, I play drums. I have played drums, and I'm not a terrible drummer. I'm not a great drummer, but Steve is a good drummer. He's a great drummer. I can't do what Steve can do, and Steve can do that sort of stuff that I can't do. Like, it's not even he doesn't even have to think about it. So good on you guys. Like, you guys found a really good player there. Not to say any of you are any lesser, just that I'm always just fascinated by guys like Steve. He's a really good player. I could gush about him all day. um, but if I did that, we wouldn't have much of a stream now, would we? So let's move on. Let's move on to the bass here. So we're going to do a little more copying and pasting. And again, a lot of this is preemptive. A lot of this is just like how it starts out. And some of this stuff's not going to make a lot of change. Some of this is just going to stay exactly the same, and that's totally fine. I think this was one of the last songs that I actually recorded for the album, in no small part due to the fact that it is a longer song, which it is. This is a 12-minute, just shy of 12-minute long song, with multiple moving parts. You've got stuff like Here for a purpose, stuff like this. I like progressive rock, guys. I'm really good at it. Not really. But anyways, the point is, because the song has so many moving parts, it's really difficult to narrow it down with a single, like, I'm going to copy and paste all this stuff over, but at the end of the day, I'm going to have to make more adjustments, which is why I say this is probably going to take longer than just till 7 o'clock. Even if I'd started mixing right from the get-go. Oh, thank you. I really appreciate it. And as a note, likewise, Mr. Christopher Janssen and JT Sutherland, super stoked to hear what you guys got coming. Like, no joke, not even exaggerating. I'm so excited to hear what you guys have. You guys, oh man, not even gonna lie. I actually consider you guys a little bit of an influence at this point. Even though I've only gotten to see you guys play live twice, I haven't. No, it's totally fine. I haven't actually listened to the EP I bought from you guys. I haven't listened to a lot of stuff. Just life. in general. But excuses aside, I haven't actually listened to that EP all the way through. I have listened to some of it because I had to when I was trying out for the band, but that was only like one or two songs. But I'm so excited to hear what you guys have, because just the cover. Fair enough. Yeah, fair enough. Um, so just what I heard from the cover, the oh, what's the song called? The cover you guys did, the Billie Eilish song, No Time to Die? Um t- uh I'm so sorry. I can't think of the name. Well, the cover you guys did was really awesome. I was yeah, No Time to Die. Yep. Uh phenomenal. Phenomenal. I don't know, Chris, I don't know if Jeremy shared with you the text that I sent him about that cover. I was like a kid in a candy store listening to it. To be clear, I am not a fan of pop music and like Billie Eilish and stuff like that. But your guys' cover, oh, is so fucking good. I could go on. No, 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 no. I'm gonna derail myself here. It's so fucking good. Um, fuck. Just thinking about it, it gets me pumped. It was so good. It was so good. Uh, uh. Anyways, but yes, actually, that is a good example of what you can accomplish with good mixing. Because if you guys had just played that song straight with no mix in there, like it would sound fine. You guys are good musicians, so it's not like it would sound bad. But having the good mix is really what sold. Like you can really hear the parts that Chris plays from his keyboard. You can hear the parts that Steve's doing with his drums. That's a great mix at work. A good mix will always allow you to hear not only what everything is going on, um, but also just everything that makes a song really just sing. You know, it's hard to explain in layman's terms, unfortunately, and for me at least, it's really hard to explain in non-layman's terms because I'm kind of an of a dip and not exactly super great at stuff. I definitely have never considered myself an amazingly great teacher, but part of that is because I get easily distracted. Yay for ADHD, which I have not been diagnosed with, but very likely have. My brother was diagnosed with it. My dad has it, most assuredly. So, yeah, no, it's pretty likely. But that's okay. Absolutely. Absolutely. You could have a great mix, but if the song is just bland, it'll sound good. It'll sound fine, but who cares? The best example I can think of is listen to modern day country. Modern day country sounds awesome. It's mixed beautifully. It sounds great, but it's really just like bland and emotionless and dull. Old school country, on the other hand, for the most part, doesn't sound really great. Go back and listen to those old Johnny Cash recordings, even like some of his more professional stuff like Walk the Line and Ring of Fire. And those are amazing songs. Those are great. I love Johnny Cash. And you listen to those mixes though. Like obviously it was a different time. They don't have the technology we have now. But you listen to those songs and like the guitars only just barely audible. The horns in Ring of Fire are almost extra loud. Like they couldn't quiet them down a little bit. Like they were just already. And you're just like, whoa, 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 back it up, dude. And the drums are like you can barely hear them. And the bass is in there. You hear the bass okay. And then, of course, you hear Johnny, love is a burning thing. And it's the mix is just all over the place. It's weird. And it's not terrible for the time. But to relate it back to like how we do things now, it's really different and it's really low quality. but you'll never forget that song if you've ever heard it. I fell into a burning ring of fire. You went down, 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 and the flames went higher. And it burns, burns, burns. The ring of fire. The ring of fire. Like that deep voice just sells it to you. Johnny Cash had a great, he wasn't the best singer, but he had a great delivery. And it just sells it. It just really sells it. And that is the sign of a good songwriter, regardless of a good performer or a good mix. A good songwriter, look at someone like Bob Dylan. Oh my God. The best Bob Dylan songs were never performed by Bob Dylan. With the one exception, Knocking at Heaven's Door. You know, you ever go back and listen to, you know, the times they are changing. You know, Bob Dylan he was a terrible singer, but that wasn't the point. The point was the message. The point was what he was talking about at the time. But you listen to other people sing those songs. All Along the Watchtower, that's a Jimi Hendrix song, right? Nope, Bob Dylan wrote it. And Bob Dylan's version, well, it's not good. It's pretty bad. It's pretty abysmal, really. He's got this harmonica part that's just really obnoxious. No shit. Yeah, no shit. The classic Jimi Hendrix song, All Along the Watchtower, was actually originally a Bob Dylan song, and not like even all that long before Jimi Hendrix played it. It was like, I don't even know that it was a year. It was only a year or two that Bob Dylan had released it, and Jimi Hendrix did a cover. And the Bob Dylan original, go listen to it. It's obnoxious. It's not what you would expect. It sounds like this old folk musician trying to sound bluesy. It was you know, all along the watchtower. It's just this obnoxious harmonica part. But then you hear Jimi Hendrix do all along the watchtower. And it's just got this totally different vibe and this totally different feel. It's just amazing how a song can change depending on who plays it. And that's not really a whole lot to do with mix, but like you say, it can really change. The people you work with, the people who are performing, can make a whole world of difference. And the mix can help with that for sure. It can make a lot of changes for you. But God, if you've got someone like Jimi Hendrix in your band, first and foremost, congratulations. You've got some necromancy magic on your side because, of course, Jimi Hendrix sadly died at the age of 27. But if you got someone like that on your side, do not let him go. Do not let that guy go, because holy shit, what an amazing talent. What an amazing talent. That's a guy. If you let that go, you might as well just give up, because best you'll do is Oasis. And don't get me wrong, I like Oasis. Truly, I do. But one of the biggest gripes that I have about Oasis is a lot of their music. It sounds just a little bit forced. It sounds like they're really trying to make the sound that they have, you know. And a lot of that comes from, oh, I have two compressors. How the hell did I manage that? That's because I'm not paying attention. Oh, I remember why. I know what's going on here. Okay. Yeah, that makes a lot more sense. Okay. Here we go. Limiter. Copy. And a part of that is just the brothers behind the band really didn't get along. And that is, I mean, that can make a huge difference, a significant difference. In just like when a band doesn't get along, it's hard to hide that fact. Not impossible, but difficult. But it shows up in the music. You'll hear stuff that just doesn't sound right. A great example of this is the last Audio Slave album. So the first two are actually really good. And the last one, the band was very split. particularly between Chris Cornell and the bassist, and then the drummer and the guitar player, or Tom Morello. And because they were so split, and maybe I'm wrong. I'm happy to admit that I'm wrong. But I genuinely believe that because they were so divided, it resulted in what sounds to me like pieces of songs that don't belong together being put together in order to make complete tracks. The best example I can think of is the original Fire. The drummer is playing this driving but 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 but, and Chris is singing this like gospel piece. The original Fire, and then the guitar comes in, and the bass comes in, and it's Rage Against the Machine riffs, and it doesn't work. Like, it doesn't sound good at all, at least not to me. And it's just like they're playing this, like, you know, while he's a, it just sounds like I'm waiting for someone to go like, what the hell are you doing, you know? And I don't know, I could be very wrong. Maybe they worked together for those songs really well, and then they had problems. Maybe those songs came together exactly how I think. But whatever happened, that third album, they were having problems, and it shows, and it really, really shows. And it's a real shame, because imagine what we could have had. I mean, I'm sad that Chris Cornell passed away anyways, but imagine what we could have had the band stayed together. That could have been another, God, that could have been a whole nother number of years of albums, of work. Just, I'm not the biggest Tom Morello fan specifically, but, oh, really? I didn't know that. But that's not surprising, actually. A guy like Cornell, he's one of those guys. I heard the same about Ronnie James Dio, actually. Ronnie James Dio was famously very difficult to work with because he knew enough about what else was going on around him to know when he didn't like what he was hearing. And yeah, that's not entirely surprising. For those who end up watching this later, real quick, you might notice I'm just kind of adding stuff. This is all part of the copying and pasting process that I maybe probably should have just done this off stream, but this is a lot of what you'll end up doing. Maybe not this specifically, but this kind of thing is a lot of what you'll end up doing once you already have a good mix for what's coming. Because when you make an album, not to completely change the subject, but when you make an album, you want it to sound pretty consistent. And consistency comes with not just your mix, but a lot of other factors. When Thunderfish recorded the album that we recorded, the one album we recorded, we actually recorded all of the full band parts, the major rhythm parts, in one day over the course of, like, I don't know, not even 8 hours. We got together in the studio and we played our songs from start to finish in the order that they were going to appear on the album. And the producer, my friend Chris Jules, he was just kind of along for the ride for that part. Just listening to us, because we had practiced inside and out, backward and forward, every single part to make sure that it was as absolutely perfect as we could do it. And a lot of that is necessary, because something that they don't tell you when you get into making music, and by they I mean even the professionals actually pretty regularly leave it out, And I think it's true for most people. Maybe not for all people, but for most people. Recording and performing are drastically different things. When you go to record a piece of music versus just playing it, like when you play live, there's a little bit of wiggle room. If you know what you're doing and you make a mistake, you just move on and no one will notice. Even the best musicians in the world, the Steve Vais, the Jan Hammers, if Mozart were alive today, he would tell you, I didn't make mistakes. Not any that you could hear, anyways. And it's true. It's not that mistakes didn't get made or that mistakes couldn't be made. It's when you learn how to play, especially if you learn how to perform, one of the fundamental things they teach you, and I learned this when I was playing clarinet in like elementary school, you don't stop for anything. You don't stop for anything. If you miss a note, doesn't matter. Just keep going like you didn't. Because if you stop, the moment you go, ah, fuck, the moment that you go, ah, shit, I missed it, that's when the audience notices. But if you don't, they won't pick up on it. And most musicians, even in the audience, won't. Now, some people will. Some people will go, I've been there. Chris, I'm sure you have been there. And actually, Jeremy, I bet you've been there too, where you see a band that you've seen before or a band whose music you're very familiar with, and you hear them make that mistake and you go, like, what? That wasn't right. In the first live DVD that Korn put out, I remember even as a kid watching it, and there's a particular part. Oh yeah, it's real easy to criticize yourself, because you know, if you're paying attention at all, you know. I have. Well, okay. I'm gonna say that I have notoriously been bad about that myself. I I can't speak for anyone else who's worked with me, but I know for a fact that I've had shows where I flat out just got depressed, like defeated, where it felt like that's it. I'm a terrible musician. And I've got the band being like, I didn't hear anything. I didn't hear it. And I'm like, dude, I missed so much shit. I was fucking up left and right. And even the band, like I said, in Thunderfish, were like, really? Are you sure? You're not making that up? You're not just trying to down on yourself? Because I don't think you did. And I'm like, no, I fucking missed this note and I missed this note. And it's, it's very true what they say. You are absolutely your own worst critic. And critics, yeah, and that can happen. Um, I I have definitely noticed mistakes with other band members if I know to listen for them. Sometimes I don't. Um, it's hard to explain. I don't have perfect pitch. I don't claim to have perfect pitch, but I do have really good relative pitch. Um, and so I've definitely found myself in a situation where I was at a live show and I could definitely hear when someone made a mistake. Um, or at least was aware acutely that someone had made a mistake, even if I wasn't necessarily sure what the mistake was. And some of that comes from being able to read people's faces. Some of that comes from just knowing the songs really well. Like I said, the first Korn DVD, it's literally just called Korn Live. I had become super familiar with Korn's music up to that point, and hearing them even in the first song, even in the opening track, "Here to Stay," there's a part, and I forget where now because it's been a hot minute since I've watched that show. But there's a moment in that song where Jonathan Davis goes full force with his vocals, and he is not singing the right note. And if you know what to listen for, you hear it, and it's immediate, and it's like, Whoa, John, calm it down there, man. But the dude sells it. Like, he just goes for it. He's just like, fuck it, I don't care. And that's what you have to do. That's just how it works. But the thing about it is, man, that audience cheered like nothing went wrong. I guarantee they didn't hear shit. And frankly, if I'm being honest, I've seen them play live in person, and I've seen another live show that they put out, as well as a couple of others, live clips of other shows that they've done. And they are solid live. They are actually really good live. Um, but man, I don't know if it was just that show. I don't know what it was. But that first live DVD, there is some hard mistakes and noticeable mistakes that they make. If you didn't know any better, you might think that they were not a good band live. Because they didn't, like, it's not destroyed. It's not absolutely unsalvageable. But man, oh, it's rough. And I've definitely heard worse. If you ever get a chance, check out System of a Down live. They're pretty abysmal live. And I love System of a Down. Their studio recordings are phenomenal. And I could listen to any one of their albums any day of the week and never have a problem. But by God, you check them out live, it's different to a degree that I can't even explain. They skip over parts. They don't use any backing tracks, which at face value might seem like a really cool thing. But you almost wish they did. Because man, there's harmony parts that Darren Malakian doesn't even try to recreate. There's instrumental parts that just go unattended to, that just leave a song completely empty, and they do nothing to replace them. They just do their thing, and all right, whatever. So, it's always gonna be a thing. You always just kind of have to play the best you can and have fun with it. Yeah. But who else pulls that off that doesn't use a lot of backing tracks? Or didn't, I should say? Pink Floyd. And I'm here to tell you, they pulled it off. And I have faith. I think you guys will figure it out, one way or another. Not having backing tracks is not the end of the world. And I would say that you guys are good enough live that if you guys not rework the songs, but, kind of rework your parts to cater to the lack of parts behind them, you'll be able to make it work without that. And what I mean by that, obviously, is not like, try to sing the best, try to sing this part over this part or whatever necessarily, but just, if you just cater to it, I mean, you guys know, I don't need to tell you how to fucking do this shit. You guys have been doing it at least as long as I have, if not longer. And and that makes a huge difference. That significantly changes, with everything. So you guys know, and it's, the best skill to have as anything, musician. What is this? Oh yeah, I suddenly remembered I had multiple tempo changes. I know my own music. Anyways, no. What I was gonna say is, the best skill you can have as a musician is improv. The ability to improvise, to figure your shit out on the fly. I am a good musical improviser. I'm not always the best improviser in other things, as you can likely tell. But when it comes to music, I have always tried to introduce an element of improvisation into the music. And the way, personally, and I'm not saying anyone else should do this, I'm not saying that this is a good idea, but this is always something that I have wanted to do, because Pink Floyd did this and they were a huge influence on me, is I don't write guitar solos. I just improvise. So, like, okay, for example, when I tried out for you guys, we played We played the Chevelle cover, and I want to say it was No Remorse, but it might have been a different song. What was the other song? I have to look it up. We played the cover by Chevelle. No, I can't think of it. Can you tell that I'm on the spot here? Um, I know the song. Yes, Indifference. That was the song that we played. Yeah. Anyways, Indifference. That was the song. So there's a section in Indifference where it goes. There's a heavy, distorted guitar part right after the chorus, and it goes into this kind of ethereal, keyboard centric part where your vocals do this kind of like ah, sort of thing, and you sing this really cool part. Yes, every single note. I made that up right there on the spot. The only thing I knew about that part was that there was that part, and I wanted to work in just a little bit, not a heavy amount, but a little bit of lead guitar in that part because it was so blank. And I didn't want to interrupt the vocals, but because the vocals weren't singing any words specifically, I also wanted to complement them. So I came up with this like little flamenco riff, this little like kind of scalar walkthrough, and that was it. Had I joined the band, and maybe this would have actually I appreciate that. I do. I really appreciate that. But had I joined the band, this might have pissed you guys off, and I wouldn't blame you because I've had people complain about this before. That part wouldn't have been the same twice because I just made it up right then and there. I just improvised it. I knew what kind of scale I needed, and that's what I played. But that was it. I didn't have a set part that I wrote for that. I didn't come up with it and like wrote specific notes for it. And while I appreciate your compliment, I imagine, well, maybe not, maybe I'm wrong, but I imagine you guys would have been like, hey, maybe you should fucking write a part for that, man, because it sounds really good, but it keeps changing. One of the first bands I was in, I didn't know it until after we'd broken up, but one of the first bands I was in, uh, the other guitar player and I worked closely to write the songs that we were working on. And I did the same thing there. I improvised guitar solos. And it was funny because I actually even wrote guitar solos for me to play, but I just didn't want to play them because I didn't want to just play note for note what I had written. I wanted to have that improvisation part, that little level of, yeah, well, maybe, yeah, who knows? But, in this case, this guy was not about that. He wanted me to play the parts either that he had written or that I had written. And apparently he fucking hated that I didn't. Every time we'd get together and practice, I would just play. And apparently he was fucking mad at me. Which I personally, in hindsight, I think it's really funny because it's like, I'm sure like nowadays the guy'd be like, he'd be over it. I'm sure like what it's 20 years later, like there's no fucking way he's still fucking mad about it. But well, not 20 years, but almost 20 years later, there's no fucking way he's still mad about it. But it still cracks me up to think about it because it's just like, that's just how I do. In Thunderfish, I did the same thing. We'd come to there was one guitar solo that I wrote for Thunderfish, actively wrote for Thunderfish. And every other solo, I just made it up as I went. And a lot of that was because, not just because I like to have improv, but because I think that's where a lot of the emotion comes from. When you write a part, fair enough. And that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. You know, I was in a covers band before I met you guys. And I'm here to tell you, like, some bands, they like that improvisation. Some people do. And some don't. And some people have a mentality towards it. They want you to play a part. And if you can't play that part, they're like, what's wrong with you? Why are you insufficient? And there's nothing wrong with that. Um, it's going to be different for everybody. Like I said, there's no right or wrong. And if that's what works for you guys, fucking do it, man. I'm here to tell you, you may be a bit of a pain in the ass in that regard, but here's what we're going to say. What I'm going to say about it. No time to die. Refer back to my comment. That part of that was a result of you being right. And that's true as well. But part of that was you being, quote, a pain in the ass. You saying, we came up with this part. This is the part we wrote. This is the part that I came up with. Play this part. And I'm going to be honest with you, as much as I love improv, when I get married to a part, and I can easily get married to a part, I'm the same way. The best example I can think of on the Thunderfish album, there's a song called The Great Debacle. And in that song, there's a guitar part that I totally ripped off from Primus's cover of The Devil Went Down to Georgia. It's this ba 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 ba, and it's this kind of chromatic power chord walk down. It starts on the E minor, it goes up to the G, and then to the F sharp, and then to the F, and back down to the E. And well, E minor, E fifth. And one day while we were playing it, I was getting really bored with it. So I came up with a slightly different part for myself, this harmony part where we would play all the same thing on the first run, the ba, 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 but then I jumped up to a B. So where everyone else was just doing that ba, 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 I went ba, 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 ba. So it goes up to the B, down to the B flat or A sharp, and then down to the A. And that harmony almost gave it this, like, I don't know how to explain it other than it made me feel like Godzilla. Like this really big, imposing threat sort of thing. And the song itself is about Lemmy Kilmister from Motorhead. And in fact, in the chorus, we even say he must be a roadie. And that part was my part. That was my part. And I played it, and I didn't impose it on anybody. Yeah, Gojira, Gojira. And then one day, the bassist, started playing the part. And I was like, hey, dude, what are you doing? And he goes, oh, I just really like the part, so I thought it would be cool if I played it. And I was like, well, no, don't. Because my part, I came up with that for my part because it makes my part stand out. If you play it, it takes a whole bunch of power out of the other part. And now it sounds like that part's just really weak. Like that's the main part of the song. It just completely takes the power out of the part. And then the drummer chimes in and he goes, no, dude, play that part. It sounds great. And I'm like, please don't. Please don't. And I'm just like begging with him, please don't. And finally, what I said was, and I'm going to wholeheartedly admit it, I was so petty. I said, okay, here's the deal. Either you stop playing the part or I stop playing the part. And he didn't stop. And it sounded so bad, like so bad, with only the bass going up to that B. It just took all the power out of that G walk down, that G chromatic walk down to E. It just took all the power out of it to have the bass go up to the B. And even he came back and was like, okay, dude, look, we got to figure this out because it sounds terrible without you doing it. And I said, I told you the solution. Stop playing my fucking part. And by God, he stopped until we recorded the album. No shit, he put it on the album. And now I will never love that song like I once did. Apart from the fact, and you know, the song still came out great. I'm not complaining about how that album came out at all. But he worked it in there, and oh, there's some of those songs on that album that I can't listen to now without just going, nope, that's not my song. I didn't have any part of that. That wasn't how I wanted it to be. That sounds like shit. And it's little stuff like that. So I get it. I do. I honestly do get it. There are certain things where I can be real perfectionist and I can be like a real stickler about it. And then there's other things I'm really just very casual about. Like I said, with solos, I'm real improv. I'm real casual. Play whatever you want. If it's not the same solo every time, fucking David Gilmour made a fucking career out of not playing the same solo twice live. He could. It's not that he couldn't. He just didn't. If you ever get a chance, listen to The Wall, the album, and then find the live album they did. Is There Anybody Out There? He doesn't play a single solo in that album, in that live album. He doesn't play a single solo exactly the same. They're close. Don't get me wrong. He does play elements correctly, but they're completely different otherwise. They're very, very different otherwise. And it's still just as good live as it was on the recording. Like, it's phenomenal. And getting back to the topic at hand, some of that was the mixes. I'm so ADHD. I'm sorry to anyone who's watching this. Okay, so as you might have noticed, or maybe you didn't, because rant over, anyone watching this will see I have finished copying and pasting all the shit. So, these parts kind of vary between having multiple guitar parts or one guitar part. This is just one guitar part. I don't like it. For now. Now, what I might end up doing, because it's just, this is a tough one. Guitar parts. Something you learn about mixing is that, pardon me, goodness. Guitar parts, sometimes they're really good when they're just on their own. You know, System of a Down only has one guitar player, and they make great music with only one guitar player. But I'm here to tell you, they don't only use one guitar track. Yeah, that doesn't surprise me. It also doesn't help when I'm fucking flailing around like a cartoon. Anyways, so when System of a Down plays, they don't only have like one guitar track, and a lot of that comes from the fact that when you only have one guitar player, you kind of have to work with what you've got. And in the case of a song like this, of course, that really makes a difference. I'm going to turn this down a little bit so that way you can kind of hear me a little better when I also, actually, let me do a thing here. Okay. Can you guys hear the song okay? And can you hear me better? How's it sound now? Much more better. Hey, mixing. Who knew? It's like if you turn the volume down on one thing, you can hear other stuff. Who knew? So, a lot of that is super, super sexy. Ooh, baby, we gonna make the baby. Anyways, Family Guy references. I haven't made those in years. Anyways, so, when you go to do a thing, lol, the end. Okay, stop. And and we're done. So when you go to do a mix, like I said, if it's a mix, you're approaching having already mixed a lot of stuff. The thing you're gonna end up doing a lot of is not necessarily copy and pasting, but you're gonna have a space to start from. In this case, I've already got a lot to work with here. You can see I've got all these effects here. Now, all of these vocal effects I haven't copied and pasted over just yet. All the instrumental stuff, all this stuff is all copied and pasted over already, so you can hear it. It's not drastically different because a lot of the stuff I already had already here. But we want to make sure that these vocal parts also sound really good. So right now we can tell that these are really quiet. If I were to put this out now, you wouldn't understand what I was saying. You wouldn't hear what's going on. And some of that is volume. Some of that is also low mic input. These were recorded at pretty, I don't know if it was necessarily a low mic input, but not as a high a mic input as, like, say I have now. So what you're hearing almost sounds like I'm going, we brought you here for a purpose. And it's like, ah! And you don't want that. You don't want that in your mix. So there's a lot of ways you can fix that. When you sing low, when you get down real low, sometimes stuff gets real quiet. Low. You can almost just barely hear it. And some ways to fix that are you get right up on the microphone like that, or you record your part at a higher mic input. My voice, as you can probably guess, if you've watched this long into this stream, as at least 2 people have, my voice is naturally kind of more mid-range. So when I sing really low like that, I have to drop my voice pretty down far. And when you drop your voice really down like this, the volume decreases pretty adamantly. It's not as easy to keep a long, loud note when you're way down here. Now, some people have much lower voices naturally, so they can really belt that stuff. You know, I think of guys like Peter O'Toole, I think his name was. No, Peter Steele. Sorry, Peter Steele. Peter O'Toole was an actor. Peter Steele of the band Typo Negative. Considering I don't know what that sounds like, I'm okay with it. Anyways, Peter Steele from Typo Negative naturally had he had this really deep voice. We see now, just this really naturally, ooh, what are you doing? And almost this really menacing bass to his voice. I don't have that. So I don't have the range of volume per se. So you listen to this part, for example. Tell me who you are. And that's a little more in my range, but it's still pretty low. So one way we can fix that is we up the volume. Tell me who you are. Just like that. So you can still hear the guitar, just a little bit. Why have you brought me here? Another thing about mixing that you'll see me do a lot. Some of it I will mention. I'm going to bring it up just now. This is a personal thing. You don't have to do this, but this is a personal thing. And I don't know if I imagine professionals do this, but I like to cut out all this little in-between shit where it's like, there's no volume, there's nothing happening. Because personally, I don't want people hearing me going in between takes, where I'm just like, I don't want to hear people hearing me breathe or, hearing people hear me do stuff. Like, I don't want to hear that. And some musicians, I hate to keep coming back to these guys, but like Korn is a perfect example of this. They'll keep that stuff in there where you hear Korn, and that adds a level of intensity. Oh yeah, yeah, for sure, for sure. And that does, or I should say, can add a level of intensity to the sound and the feeling and the depth of the vocals. Oh God, my God, is it where you have that deep, like, breathe in where he's like choking on it. And that can be really good. But you don't want, perfect example. La la la. La 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 la. You don't want that in your song. Like that, first and foremost, most people. Yes, exactly. Exactly. And some of that is reality of just people. Like you just exist and you can't control the things you do. And I'm the same way. I don't know that I necessarily lip smack, but one thing I do is I'll sing and I'll do a part and I'll go, tell me who you are. Just in between takes, and I'll just, I've got the time. So you'll hear, if I kept some of these in, like not this particular take that I used, but you'll hear in some of my older takes, you might hear me do something like, tell me who you are. Excuse me. And like that's not necessary. You don't want that in the song. It completely disrupts the mood. It completely disrupts the what you're trying to sell from the song. So I like to go through and just remove all that shit. Um it's not so bad for like instrumental parts. I'm glad I can crack you up. But for vocal parts especially, I'll do this little bit of removal and just kind of reduce them down. The other thing, go away. The other thing about this. Oh, come on now. There we go. There we go. It also helps you to focus on what you're really trying to go for here. If you've got all this other space, the inclination is you're gonna just want to like go through and make sure everything sounds good. But if there's just this like empty space in here, like who cares? Like you're not missing anything there. You're not hearing anything special. And unless you actively put something in there, like a backmasked track or, something, some sort of Easter egg for the fans. Congratulations, this is the part that I'm telling you listen to. And then you reverse it so that when people hear it, it goes, yeah, pop it, sip that, and, everyone thinks you're talking about worshiping Satan or some shit. Like, if you do that, that's great. Pink Floyd did that. Fucking Weird Al did that shit. Marilyn Manson has that all over his albums. And there's nothing wrong with that, but if that's what you're going for, you're still going to want to make it work within the confines of the music. One of the best examples of that I can think of actually from Pink Floyd is there is a part in a Pink Floyd song. What was it, Pink Floyd? Well, I guess there's a part in two Pink Floyd songs. The last track of The Wall and the first track of The Wall end with, so this is the part where we come in. This is a famous line. I say famous. This is a somewhat famous line by Pink Floyd. So this is the part where we come in, is the part where they literally came in. At the end of the album, not the live album necessarily, but in the studio album, at the end of the album, they're playing this part. And it just ends abruptly. And you hear this voice clip, so this is the part. And that's it. It ends. But if you listen to the beginning of the album, you hear a voice go, where we come in, and you hear the part start. It's because it's all a loop. You could literally loop the album, and it would loop continuously. So this is the part where we come in. And I don't know if that was intentional on the band's part to symbolize like the loop of psychological problems that people go through on tour, because that's what a lot of this album is about, is like the suggestive turmoils of being a professional musician and being on tour and constantly being away from people that you have any connection to, and how it can weigh down on you and tear you apart and really like bear down on you as a thing, to the point where you feel like you're more than you are, but also less than you truly are. And so at the end of the album, they break down the wall. The last line of the trial is tear down the wall. And the last song of the album, I mean, is outside the wall. And in the live show, at this point, they have built up a literal wall across the stage. And at the last minute of the trial, they break it down. They literally drop the bricks to the ground. And I mean, they're not like proper bricks. Like it's, I don't know that it would hurt anybody, but they also build it far enough back from the stage it doesn't drop on the audience or anything. But the idea is they literally build a wall and then tear it down. And at the end of the album, the band and all the backing musicians come out and they play the last song, Outside the Wall. So there's this kind of underlying element of like, well, does that mean it doesn't end? That means like, okay, well, we fixed this part, but now there's another problem. Now it just starts up again because there's another tour around the way. It's hard to know exactly what Roger Waters was intending with all of that. But the end game result is that album, the studio version at least, loops indefinitely. And that's a really cool thing. And I'm going to be honest, I don't know how I got on that topic. So let's move on. So when mixing your album, you want to make sure, I feel anyways, you want to make sure that stuff kind of lines up, of course, but also just that you don't have a lot of this unnecessary break. Backmasking is great and all that, but if you need empty silence, you need empty silence. In this case, I wanted to emphasize this guitar part. So the vocals start here. Tell me who you are. So that guitar part, I wanted to have emphasized. And the best way to emphasize that is to not have anything around it. So the best way to do that exactly is that. So the way I have it set up, the guitar part in the left channel is just playing that dun 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 dun. And the only way you can tell that we're on a new beat is the drums. Everything else just sounds like it's supposed to. You have that ride. It's not the ride crash, but the bell. Mm-hmm. And that is true. The more you'll get just little nuanced things. Anything from like maybe you bumped into the wall or you stepped on a cord or just little things that you don't think the microphone picks up. Maybe you farted. Who knows? And the microphone picks all that up. And if you stack it, it just becomes that much more audible. And by removing that blank space, exactly, microphone bleed. You get rid of that microphone bleed. In my room, where I record, I've got 2 fans going at any given time. And while in my guitar parts, you won't hear it because those are DI'd in. My bass parts, you won't hear it because those are DI'd in. On my vocal parts, I'm just using the microphone that you see here. This is a great microphone for vocal. It's actually a vocal microphone. And it picks up. If you turn it up just enough, it'll pick up whatever you need it to pick up. Unfortunately, that also means it'll pick up things you don't want it to pick up. The best example I can think of for that, on my SoundCloud, I have an acoustic EP that I literally just refer to as the acoustic sessions. Volume 1 or whatever the fuck. And for that EP, I recorded 6 tracks. Have a good one, Chris. Thanks for coming around. Hopefully we'll see you later. If not, have a good one. And looking forward to the new tracks. So that EP, I recorded 6 songs for, and I ended up only using 4. One of the songs I recorded, I was listening to, and I heard this, I don't know how to describe it, this in the background, this really low, bassy, and I was like, what the hell is that noise? And I turned it up, and I was still hearing it. I turned it up, and I turned it up, and I tried EQing it out. I tried all sorts of stuff, but it was just always there on the, almost like on the periphery. And I realized what it was. I didn't realize it at the time, but I realized what it was. At that point in my life, I was living in a house with some friends, and my room was next to the laundry room. Like, the laundry room and my room shared a wall. And I don't remember if it was me or somebody else, but somebody was doing laundry when I decided to record my vocal parts. And I didn't realize it had picked it up until months later when I sat down to start mixing the EP. And there it was. I'm hearing this. I'm going, what the hell is that? Oh God, it's the fucking laundry machine. Must have been the dryer. I'm just sitting here going, what the how did I miss that shit? I didn't think the microphone would pick that shit up. And it's interesting because I have an omnidirectional microphone that I would have expected to have picked that sort of thing up. And those omnidirectional microphones are beastly when it comes to just picking up shit you don't want them to. Because that's what they're designed to do. They're designed to just pick up everything. But this is not an omnidirectional microphone. It's just a good studio mic. So as you can imagine, I just didn't know what to expect. And boy, did it catch me off guard the first time I heard it. So anyways, moving right along. So as we dig through this, there's a lot of parts. Well, I shouldn't say a lot of parts. There's a number of parts here that, as of right now, I've got all of these parts kind of on the same level. I'm going to do a thing, and this is something I've been doing with all my parts. I'm going to turn the guitars down just about, we'll say, minus 1.7 here, 2.5 here, minus 1.7 here, minus 2.5 here. And we're going to drop the bass down by about, for now, we're going to do 3.0. Now, the reason for this is because in the final mix, right now I've got the master mix down pretty significantly. But in the final mix, those guitar parts are going to be way loud. Who you are. And a lot of that is because you can hear everything that's going on already. So we turn them down here on these sliders, mostly because we don't want them to just pummel the listener. We want to be able to hear everything, but we don't want it to pummel the listeners. Giving them that distortion, giving them this feel, giving them what they want will allow us to hear it, but not feel overpowered by it. You can hear those harmonies, but they're not slapping you in the face. So this first vocal part is sounding okay. We've got a little bit of... Tell me who you... We've heard this one. Let's hear how the next one turns out. Why have you brought me here? It's not so bad. You show me all these things.
What do you want from me?
So this is a good example of where we can use a little bit of a fade out. The voice carries on a little long here. So what we can do is we can just, in Studio One, it's just a couple of clicks and drags.
What do you want from me?
We can even do like lift that up a little bit so it sounds a little more natural. Yeah, there we go. And so that will alleviate some of that drag out, where we don't want it to drag out so far. And that was probably just me not paying attention when I went to record it. Mistakes like that happen all the time. There's so many things that can go wrong when you're trying to do a thing, and you just get caught up in it. When you're playing live, when you're recording, it's easy to kind of forget, not necessarily the timing, but it's easy to maybe hold a note longer than you intended or cut it shorter than you intended, especially when you're doing harmonies or doubling. That's really easy to fuck up, where it's like you feel like you've nailed it, you know, ha ha ha, and then you hear it play back and it's like ha ha. Wait, why is that one shorter? Well, that's how you recorded it. Well, fuck, start it over. I got to re-record that. That's not right, you know. And that happens all the time. Even like here, like I've made that mistake plenty of times. So let's see. I can probably bring the guitar distortion. Probably bring the bass down. So, one thing I want to bring up that I didn't mention before is in the master track, I put on this tri-compressor that I've used in all of the songs. In the pre-mix, this allows for a pretty hefty compression on everything going in before it's even like coming back out. And that'll kind of narrow the field a little bit and make everything just a little more manageable in the sound space. And then I added this multi-band dynamics thing, which I edited a long time ago with the first song, and I haven't really had to change it much since. It just captures all of the range of things just right for how I want the album to sound. And then I added this little bit of limiter here that this is all post mix, if you will. And what that does is it allows it to basically, as things are coming out, it'll adjust that stuff naturally as they're coming out to you. And the nice thing about that is it means that I can turn the volume up and it'll keep it from blowing your ears out. It'll keep it from clipping, which is a problem that you run into, where you'll see like these meters here on the side, they're not spectrometers, but they're just audio cues or audio meters that tell you like how loud it's getting. They're the decimeters, I guess, is what they would be. Oh, no, not really. They're gauges for how loud things are playing. And if they get loud enough, and you can see it's going up into this range, that's not good. You don't want that. So by reducing that and putting this limiter on it, it keeps it from clipping. And the clip is when you get that really loud, when something plays really loud and it sounds like it's just destroying everything. Fine. I didn't want to see the manual anyways. Yeah, go away. There we go. And yeah, you don't want clipping in any kind of recording. Even in your demos, honestly, if you can avoid demo clipping, um, that helps a lot. And demos are kind of a thing too, because you don't want to mix it too much, because the whole point of a demo is you're getting the band basically recording what they're going to record and sending it out as is. But in a demo recording, you want to make sure that you still are audible at least a little bit. So it helps to kind of just do some preemptive mixing, making sure your amps are loud enough that you can be heard, making sure you're not just screaming into the microphone, but just not screaming into the microphone above everything else, right? So if your mic input is at a reasonable level, you're probably good. But if you've got your mic input turned way up for the vocals and you start screaming and you can't hear anything past the vocals, it's like, well, okay, I hear the vocalist. It sounds like shit. And to be fair, demos aren't super great anyways, but still, it's I hear the vocalist, it sounds like shit. And that's not a good thing. We don't want that. So even with demos, you don't necessarily do a lot of mixing, but you also don't necessarily do no mixing. You can get away with doing some. So, there's a lot of stuff there to work with. Let's go on to the next part. So now go back to a similar part. We've got this. Turn these up.
I've seen your deeds in life.
So now this is the part of the song. So this part of the song is our main character is asking the figure that's leading him through the afterlife, like, who are you? What the hell am I seeing? What's going on? And this is the figure saying, you're dead, like I said before. And I'm here to potentially remedy that if you're capable of remedying that. So all of this part's meant to sound a little menacing, but this is actually not necessarily a character who's out to end the proverbial party. And that is why he sounds is partially why he sounds menacing, but also very harmonious. This character shows up throughout the album, but he never, and he'll show up in the second album as well, but he'll never show up as a single voice track. Anytime he shows up, he'll have multiple voices. And that was a way I decided on doing that, to kind of give each of the different characters in the story a little bit of a dynamic. Our main character can do whatever the fuck he wants. So sometimes he's just on his own, like this.
Why have you brought me here?
But sometimes he's got doubles. And sometimes he's got more than that. Like I said, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 vocal tracks here. So the main character can do whatever he wants. But in order to differentiate between characters, I did a few different things. Oh, thank you. We'll get to that part here in a little while. To differentiate between the characters, I had the idea of using different vocal styles, I guess. So for this particular character, he never sings alone. It always sounds like there's multiple voices. So anytime we hear him, he actually is the first person. He's the first vocal part we hear in the entire album. And it's just a spoken part that says, you don't know, but it's just this little vocal part that says, What have we here? Aren't you a pretty little thing? But it sounds like there's three different voices all saying it at the same time.
I brought you here for a purpose. I've seen your deeds in life.
Let's reduce this by a lot. Holy
I've
shit.
seen your deeds in
A little more than that. I want there to be echo, but not like we had. There's just a lot of echo there. Maybe let's do 20.
I've seen your deeds in life.
There we go. That gives it that ethereal, like there's not only multiple voices talking, but voices talking from behind, echoing that. And that's a cool effect, I think. I know some people aren't so into that, but I really like having a lot of like reverb and echo.
I've seen your deeds in life.
Maybe we can do a little more here. Let's do like 23.5. Not 2.5, do 23.5. And that like I said, the thing about mixing, I think I said this at some point, is I don't remember all the things I've said. Anyways, at some point I think I said this, but the thing you'll learn very quickly about mixing is a little goes a long way. Sometimes you make very small adjustments and they make all the difference in the world. They just absolutely change everything. And it doesn't seem like that would be the case. Like okay. What if we did that? Let's try. Let's try that one.
I've seen your deeds in life.
There we go. And that gives it that little bit of you so little, so kind of just this weird little ethereal feel to it. And it's all I did. I lowered the mix and the feedbacks. The mix, of course, I say of course, the mix is how much of it you're hearing. The feedback is how many echoes you'll get. So the more feedback, the more responses you'll get. And then, of course, the beats in this case is synced up to the rhythm of the song. And that'll give you more of a syncopated is not the right word, of a more synced up rhythmic response. So right now I have it set to half half notes. So, you know, so this is a whole note. You know so little. So instead it would be, you know, so little, and that's how it'll play out as we hear. Nice and simple. And then we hear, of course, the last part.
You question me. Worse than death awaits.
Ooh.
Shall I show you?
Speaking of lip smacking. Oh. 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 I'm not gonna lie, as someone who loves audio and like audio engineering and stuff like that, I've never been a fan of ASMR. Hearing someone go in a microphone, even if it's me, it's just like, oh, no, absolutely not.
Shall I show you?
Now we get to the next part. This is where I would consider doubling the guitar, just because there's so much here. I don't know if I will, though. We'll see how it turns out. I guarantee that by the time I'm done with this mix fully, you won't have seen everything, but you won't have seen everything. By the end of it all, it'll sound just a little different. But there's most of it I plan to cover entirely. Most of it I plan to cover. I plan to cover most all of it, but not most of it. But maybe some of it with little of it. Anyways, I plan to cover as much of it as I can. But there's an element of it that, like I said, once I send off the mix to my friends, they'll tell me what they think, and I'll adjust from there. And some of that is going to change elements of the song that you're not necessarily going to hear. But this is probably one of my favorite parts of the song. At this point in the song, we're ramping up. We're about to go home, so to speak. This is the part where our not main protagonist, but our secondary protagonist tells the main protagonist, "Shall I show you?" as we hear here.
Shall I show you?
And everything starts to ramp up a little bit. But then we get here, and we get 3 tempo shifts. First, the main, this is not a tempo shift, but we get, 2 tempo shifts, where we increase speed up to, what we ended up at is, looks like about 190. And this is where we go from being in 4/4 to 15/8. Now, this part is meant to symbolize the travel back in time. We're going through a warp. At this point, our main protagonists are effectively in the afterlife. And the secondary protagonist is telling the main protagonist that he fucked up. He's dead. He's not supposed to be dead, but he's dead. So he has to show him his life from an outside perspective and help him figure out what got him here in the first place. And by digging into that, they can figure it out and potentially save him and give him another shot. And this part, I remember when I wrote this part, it was like one of the most complicated parts I'd ever come up with. and trying to play it again this time around. Like obviously I did do it. It's here. It's there for all to see. But when I finally went back to it, I was like, "Oh man, what the fuck?" Cuz not only is it at a pretty high speed, but again, it drops into this 15/8 time signature. Yeah, it's in 15/8. And then it jumps from 15/8 into a 9/8 buildup into a double time signature interchange between 4/4 and 5/8. So here's the 15/8 part. Nine eight, 4/4, 15, 5/8. Oh yeah, Chris being a jazz guy, that's not surprising. Weird rhythm stuff is integral to jazz and prog rock and stuff like that, and I love that shit. So the way I figured out 15/8 is you're not going to be able to hear it super well, but I basically took apart. It's just kind of a scalar walk down from. Yeah. Okay. So it's basically a scalar walk down, starting on the second on the what would be the A string, in dad gad tuning to be clear. Um, and the whole album is in dad gad tuning, and that makes a huge difference. And you start on the fourth fret, or what would be, in this case, this note is a D, D flat or C sharp, and you just and where you would normally walk back up in a 4/4, you just do the first three. And I'm just destroying it here. I haven't practiced in a long time. I don't even know if you can hear it on the stream. But at the end of the day, what ends up happening is you get this like da 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 where it almost feels like there's a note missing. And that's what creates that 15/8 feel. This and then from there, there's a little walk up, which is why I have the 9/8. The 9/8 is mostly just there as kind of a placeholder to give the little walk up. And then this part was almost as weird because it goes from what feels like a normal time signature, at least in our neck of the woods here in America. Everything is in 4/4 or 3/4. So it goes from this, but then it jumps into this like weird 5/8 where it's like, oh, we've got an extra like 2.5 beats in there. What would that even be? It'd be like 6.5 over 4. Go fuck yourself. You know, it's like it's like I really think it's cool. I love this sort of stuff, but I'm sure there are people out there who's like, "Oh, this guy's such a douche. He thinks he's so cool." 4/4 over 5/8. Fuck this guy, you know? But it ends, the reason I did this is it's meant to showcase kind of the tumultuous traveling they're doing. Like it's just meant to be like really intense and kind of oddball and weird. And the reason it ends on, of course, this 7/8, the ba 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 ba, is to give it a central location so that when we come back to this other part, ba 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 ba, now we're in 7/4. And this part gives way to our main protagonist, explaining what it is he's seeing. And it's fuck off. It's this little bit of like long, so we look into the days, and that gives our protagonist a little bit of this lull period where he's starting to realize what he's seeing. He's starting to go, oh shit, this is my home, or this is where I grew up. And I wanted to emphasize that, but not in an intense way necessarily, by having it be in this odd time signature. And I say odd. 7 is weird, but it's not the weirdest. A lot of the time signatures, especially on this first album, are unusual but not strange. I'm planning to do a lot more weird stuff with the second album. And some of the stuff I already have recorded for the second album is already pretty weird. Probably the strangest time signature I have that's already ready for the second album is a 1716. And the 1716 comes out of a 5/8. And not only does it come out of a 5/8, it's a 5/8 that's like a it's a diminishing returns where the first 3 bars are 5/8 and then it goes into the 1716 part. But then it goes back into 5/8 for only 2 bars instead of 3. And then it goes to the 1716. Then it goes back to only 1 bar of the 5/8 before going into the 1716. And I think it repeats twice. So it's like, oh, good, fuck you. You know, it's gonna be a pain in the ass to record. And I'm gonna love every second of it. Or hate it. Or love it. Or both. Who knows? I'm gonna love hate it. It's gonna be great. I need to practice more anyways, so who knows. But this, as far as this album goes, this is one of the more complex songs, and this part in particular, I wanted to have a little bit of nuance to this element of like uncertainty. So everything being in 7, it's basically a stack of 7/8s into making a 7/4. So the guitar part is the rhythmic element behind this is that and you can hear it right from the get-go. But it's real quiet. So you can see it in your mind where there's that's almost element of like uncertainty. Like, what am I quite looking at? What am I quite looking at? What am I looking at? And a lot of that ties to the rhythm, but also just lyrical content. So where we see that the most is in these intense parts where we go from nothing to this. Now, these parts, to me, sound a little quiet in the mix. And there's a couple ways we can deal with that. We can do this. Or we can even undo that, redo this a little bit. Or automation. Now, automation is a thing that a lot of producers use, especially in like electronic music. And I love automation for a number of reasons. But one of the things about automation is you really want to be careful with how you use it. So we're going to up this to plus 2. Give it that extra boost. And we're going to do the same thing on this one. And this will give it a little bit of a boost, which up to this point this vocal part has been pretty minimal.
I brought you here for a purpose. You have a second chance. I've seen your deeds in life. You know so little.
Just threw my drink all over myself.
Yet you question me.
Now, the beauty of automation and mixing
Worse than death awaits.
is this all is unaffected. But then we get over here, and those lift up.
So we look back. So we
Wow. Did I really sing that poorly?
So
we
look back into a time. So we look
Wow. I'm gonna have to re-record that. Oh. Woof. Man. So we'll skip over that. No, I do not. I do not use autotune of any kind. And a lot of that isn't because of I used to have a problem with autotune when I was younger. I used to think it was a really what's the word? A cheating thing. I used to think it was cheating. But what it actually comes down to, yes. But what it actually comes down to is I've learned that auto-tune can be used as a great effect. And what it was originally, frankly, was a fixer thing. And sometimes you hit a note and you just can't hit that note. No matter how much you try, no matter how many takes you do, you just can't do it. So, so I will definitely have to go back and re-record that, which I'll probably do off stream. I don't think it's really worth it to try to do it on stream. That's going to be a whole nother. I mean, I might work. I don't know how. So I'll probably do that off stream. But for now, we'll just ignore this part. Probably just. So you look back into a time once lost. The rest of this sounds okay. It's just that first note. For some reason, that first note. It's so bad. How did I do that? Yeah, I'll probably just end up re-recording this whole vocal line right here. And that's fine. That happens. Mistakes, of course, occur. And having auto-tune can fix small mistakes that are really hard to pinpoint. If you've got a particular vocal part, like a lot of pop artists, for example, have, where you're doing this, yeah. So that is auto-tune. Flex pitch is just a different form of it. In what I have in Studio One is called Melodyne, and it's the same basic concept. It basically takes your vocals and just kind of shifts them. You can just shift them up a little bit or shift them down a little bit, or as in the case with like proper auto-tune, you can just basically write a whole vocal part and it'll just take it and play like a vocoder. So I'd be like, yeah, or the timing exactly, and it's really great for that. And if that's what you're looking to do, there's nothing wrong with that. I like I said, when I was younger, I used to have a real problem with that. Nowadays, I'm kind of like, eh. The only time I have a real problem with it is when it's like the Paris Hilton album. where it's like clearly they just used it not because um it was an effect, but because she just couldn't really fucking sing all that well. Um and I don't know. She was in the fucking Repo, the genetic opera movie. Um and it didn't sound like they used auto tune on her there. So maybe she can sing better than we thought, or than I thought, I should say. But they used a lot of auto tune on her album, and it was just like painfully obvious that it was like not because she could sing and they just wanted to use it as an effect, but because it was just like, oh, okay, exactly, exactly, and more to the point, on a single note, that's like if you've got a vocal part that's like, oh, where that oh doesn't have, you just can't hit that oh, that little oh not everyone can hit those individual notes really with a lot of precision. Oh, so when you can't hit those notes, having auto tune, or even just not even just auto tune, but like Melodyne or Flex Tune, where you can just adjust it just that little bit, that little bit to fix it up, not a bad thing. Definitely not against it. It's not my favorite thing, not against it. But I say that with the caveat that personally, I would rather sit here, especially because it's not costing me anything but time, and take 50 takes, 100 takes, 300 takes, whatever it takes for me to just sing it fucking right. In this case, I sang the rest of it okay. I just, that first note, for whatever reason, I was just like, fuck it. I'm just going to take the time to fix it. Like, I'm just going to take the time to fix it. And the rest of it sounds fine. Like, literally, like, you can hear it. So we look into that. Exactly. Exactly. And now, if you were in a professional studio and you had to pay for that shit and you had a limited amount of time and you were costing money as you were going, auto tune. Fucking auto tune that shit. Fix it. Because you can take after take after take, but eventually you're just wasting time. If you just can't nail it, you just can't nail it. And you got to move on. But if you've got all the fucking time in the world, like, if who gives a shit at that point? Just fucking go. Like, just take all the takes you need until you fucking get it. Because at that point, that's just you being lazy. Like, you don't have a time constraint. Just fucking do it. You know what my time constraint is? It's just got to come out at some point this year. That's my time constraint on this album. This song's not going to be a single. I'm not putting it out in March. I've got a song for that. It's done. It's ready. I'm not going to fucking put this song out. The whole idea behind the stream was so people could kind of see the mixing process and they get a chance to hear this song. At no point am I intending to play this from start to finish because of that reason specifically. I want you to hear it when it's done, when you can hear the best of the best of the best of the best that I can give for this song. At least what I can give for this song with nothing, with what I knew at this point in time. The next album will be better because there's going to be things that I can just do better. But here, especially, I wanted to do this correctly. And if I can't hit a note, if I can't sing one fucking note, I don't deserve auto-tune. That's just me being lazy. I don't have a time constraint. I gotta fucking fix that shit. And the fact of the matter is, if there's anything I'm proud of about my abilities as a musician, man, I'm a great vocalist. It sounds really egotistical to say, but I am a damn good singer. I've been working on it for a long time. I have an over 5-octave vocal range. And if I can't hit one fucking note, that goes down the drain. So I gotta at least a personal reputation for myself to upkeep. I gotta at least believe I can fix that note. Even if I'm the only one who thinks I can, I gotta at least fucking try. So, this note aside, the rest of this is probably fine. So we can at least get the idea. When I finally do go back and re-record this, which will probably be, probably not today, but probably tomorrow. This will be an easy thing to fix up and do. For the time being, because I don't want to fucking hear it, and I can't imagine anyone else would, I'm just going to delete this note. These could probably come up just a bit more. We'll do 3. And so the benefit of this is now we have a little bit of control over here. And we can do this and bring these back down. No. Stop what you're doing. Oh my God, what have I done? Ah! Okay, there we go. There we go. Anyways, we can now bring these back down. And when we get back to this next vocal part, we'll be ready for it. Because now we're going to dig into this fucking beastly, dangerous part. The part that nobody wants to hear because nobody likes death metal. I am going to do a little bit of this. I wasn't going to. I'm going to do just a hair bit. Guitar sounds a little better here. Probably that. Try putting that over on the right side. Oh, there we go. That sounds a lot better. Now the left side has a little more room. So this is definitely a part where I think I could benefit from doubling the guitars. It's hard to say. Enter the 5/4. So these vocal parts, I definitely want to beef up pretty significantly. So what I'm doing here is I'm increasing the volume on specific parts to give it not an unnatural increase, but to give it a little more oomph. And you can go through, and I love this about Studio One. I'm sure other programs do this too, but you can take these recorded parts and really just like click a part, double click it, and it'll split the tracks in two. And that allows you to really adjust the volumes for them. So it doesn't sound like, you know, go and run under your bed, fear, where the fear part drops out, right? I can turn that up a little bit more separately from the rest of the track so it doesn't get all bloated, but at the same time I can up the fear part to make it a little bit more in line with the rest of it. Do that with this here as well with these U parts. To give a little more. Now this bass line, actually not even just this bass line, but this whole back half of the song, starting here with this 4/4 switch over at 6 minutes and 51 seconds, is my Opeth part. This, more than probably any other part on the album, was me ripping off Opeth. And not a specific Opeth album either, or a specific Opeth song, but just the way that they did things, especially these coming guitar parts. Yeah, there you go. It is paying homage, ultimately. It's not a specific Opeth part that exists. It's just a part. I hate to say it because it sounds so egotistical, but this part is, I really like this part.
So we hid, yes, it's true. I kept him safe away from you. There's not much more
Thank you.
that I could do but to save him from your rain. I'll hide him away and take the pain.
So this part especially was meant to be very emotional. This is the part where we reveal that our lead protagonist isn't the only one involved in this abuse. And it doesn't specifically say it. The implication is there's someone else that he's standing up for.
And so we hid, yes, it's true. I kept him safe away from you. There's not much more that I could do but to stay away from you. There's not much more that I could do but to save him from your rain. I'll hide him away kept him safe away from you. There's not much more that I could do but to save him from your reign. I'll hide him away and take the pain. No one cares about a kid
This
who
is
needs a place to stay.
this is my misanthropy picking through. This is me not having a lot of faith in humanity. I don't want to get too political here, but this is the part where I couldn't help but kind of pointing a finger, in a way that I don't really deserve. I'm a person in and of myself. I'm as much a part of the problem, but the reality is that, sad though it is, a lot of abuse like this goes unnoticed and unchecked. And it doesn't really matter who it's geared towards. It just doesn't get acknowledged. Nothing gets done about it, and people have to live with it. And a lot of that comes from years of tradition, and a lot of it comes from people not wanting to acknowledge stuff. In this day and age, it comes from a purposeful denial. If it's a male announcing that they've had to deal with it, a lot of people are like, but you're a guy, who cares, And there's a lot of female, unfortunately, that has existed for a long time where people did the same thing. Oh, well, you deserved it for basically being a woman. It's just, there's no right answer. It's always just bad. So this was kind of my misanthropy peeking through, where the character is not only being abused, but genuinely believes that there's nothing he can do about it. He can't turn to anybody. He can't turn to the police. He can't turn to his friends or family. He doesn't, at this point, it's kind of implied he doesn't have anybody to turn to. And so I really wanted to emphasize that. This part is very solemn, very, very much what it is. Which is why it's just the guitar and the vocals.
Yes, it's true.
And just this.
I kept him safe away from you. There's not much more that I could do.
There's a lot of, especially in the vocals, and a little bit in the guitar, there's a lot of I can't think of the term now. There's a lot of build in, where a part is started like a beat early, and not even a full beat early, but just like half a beat early. And that little bit absolutely gets emphasized by the vocals, where he's like, there's not much more, where not is the downbeat, that I can do but to ba da ba ba da. It builds into that part. And that gives it not only a little bit of rhythmic interest, but, excuse me, goodness, it also gives it a sense of tension in what is otherwise already pretty solemn and somber.
Yes, it's true. I kept him safe away from you. There's not much more that I could do but to save him from your reign. I'll hide him away and take the pain. No one cares about a kid who needs a place to stay. I hit him well.
Band comes in.
From your wrath.
This gives us a little bit of a reprieve from the tension. Now the drums and the bass are there, and it feels like he's got a little of a backup. This is meant to signify hope. But again, this is my misanthropy coming through. There is no hope.
I kept him safe out of your path. I took the brunt, but the work out of your path. I took the brunt, but the worth was great. Took the brunt, but the
I really like that high note. I took the brunt. It's an unusual. Well, I shouldn't say unusual. It's just kind of a nice little change up where again the character has that almost hopefulness to them, and some of it's intentional, some of it's not. A lot of the vocal parts you hear on the album were intentional in their design as far as like bass part as like bass design goes. Ooh, whoa. But the specific notes were not necessarily intentional. And what I mean by that is I toyed around with it. And I'm sure you've done this too, Jeremy, where like you wrote a vocal part and maybe it sounded a little too repetitive to you when you went to repeat that part, like in a chorus or something. So instead of singing it exactly the same way, maybe you changed just like a little bit, you know? Instead of just doing ho ho, you went ho ho ho, you know, just that little bit of flourish gives it something a little new, you know, something a little interesting. And maybe you didn't, maybe you did. Either way, totally fine either way. But for me at least, I really like to add those little flourishes because I think it adds something more natural to what is otherwise what could otherwise be a very stiff piece if you're not careful. Um, won't necessarily be, just could be. Um,
from your wrath. I kept him safe out of your.
exactly. Because when you go to repeat that live, like imagine singing the same part over and over. You know, like how boring would that be? You'd want to change it up a little bit, at least for the live performance. And I've always been the same way. Um, it's okay to have a part that you want to be done specific, but it's also okay to play around with it just a little bit to give it a little nuance. You know, maybe not a lot, so you can still tell that there's a similarity there between parts. Exactly. And you don't want to alienate people. You don't necessarily want to change. You don't want to change it so much. You wouldn't want to go like, so I kept him safe from your wrath, and then go to, I kept him safe from your wrath. Like it's like you say, it's like, whoa, hang on, what now? Like come it back, bring it back a little bit. And that's very true. I agree. You want to make sure it's interesting for you as the singer, but you also want to make sure that's it's not just like abandon all reason, ye who have hope, because there is none. You know, it's like it doesn't have to be I am death, the bringer of destruction. You know, it's totally okay to just have a part be like, oh, this is just a I can sing along with this part. That's okay. It's just and you want that at least a little bit because I think at least because you want people to be able to like listen to this in their car. And that's actually one thing I meant to bring up earlier. When you do a mix, or at least when I do a mix, this is a little weird for me because I don't normally exclusively mix in the headphones. I have a 5.1 channel surround sound system on my PC, and while they're not like, you know, groundbreaking, the most amazing speakers ever in the world, they're really good considering I got them back in like 2008, 7, 6. somewhere in that range, 2006 to 2008. They still sound really good for how long I've had these speakers. And at 5.1 channel surround sound, I get a lot of nuanced sound that just the two stereo speakers would not give me, um, even if they were really high quality speakers. So when I mix, typically I use my headphones for a portion. I use the speakers for a portion, and some of that is because I also want to protect my hearing, which is part of why I said earlier, like you don't want to use in-ear headphones for mixing. For live stuff, in-ear headphones are great because you need to cancel out the sound around you and you want to hear what you're doing. But when you're mixing, I actually would recommend some studio headphones like what I've got. These are V-Modas, and they're phenomenal. And they're only, okay, I'm going to say a number here, and it's going to sound pretty ridiculous, especially in this day and age. They're only about $260 a pop, which is expensive for standard headphones. But these for studio quality headphones, that's actually a really good deal, especially when you compare them to other headphones that could cost you $300, $400, $500, $1,000 for similar quality for that kind of price, you know. But you can find some really decent studio quality headphones from Sennheiser, Sony, V-Moda, and they go over your ears. They can be very comfortable, and Audio Technica is another great one. Anyways, but you want to protect your hearing, especially if you're planning to be a musician for a long time. At the local level, it's difficult to say the least because you want to protect your hearing, but you know, in-ear monitors is an expense. Monitor, you know, amps are expensive, and like just having that. Imagine that live show that I helped you guys do at Sam's. What's it called? Sam's Bar and Grill or whatever it was. That place on U-Stick and Maple Grove, or U-Stick and 5 Mile. That show I helped you guys put on with your last drummer before Steve joined. And imagine trying to have monitors for that, like in-ear monitors for that. That would have been a whole nother set of cables. It would have been a whole nother expense trying to get like wireless monitors or cabled monitors, just so you guys could hear yourselves in a setting where that just wasn't going to be a very optimal choice. Like that would have been a huge problem there. And not to say it would have been a bad idea if you had them, great, but that's a tough thing to get into when you're not, you know, making thousands of dollars more than what, say, you and I are making. So, well, I don't know, actually. I can't say that. I don't know what you're making, and I don't claim to know. Don't necessarily want to know. But at least for what I'm making, in-ear monitors are just not very easy to come by on the cheap and easy. But at the time that I bought these, I was making a lot more money and not as burdened by bills as I am now. And so I was able to pick up some nice headphones, in this case these V-Modas. And oh god, I've had them since then, and they've been great. But getting back to the mix, so I feel like we've made some really good progress here. However, we are rapidly approaching 7 o'clock. It's about 6:54 now, and we've still got just this last little bit of song. So I'm thinking, I'm going to go ahead and put a stop to this, put a kibosh on this for now, come back to this at midnight. And it's been a productive day. I agree. It has been a productive day. I spent a lot of time talking. A whole lot more time talking than being productive. But that's okay. On the other hand, we are, if this is to be believed, at least 9. This is the way. Yes, it is. Flying monkeys. I get that. I get that reference. We are 9-10 minutes into this mix, and a lot of this mix has mostly just been volume. And that in this case, that's a little unusual for me. I was expecting a lot more nuanced stuff, but this one's actually been pretty straightforward. And I think a lot of it is because this song is so dynamic, um, but also because I've already done these other mixes. Exactly, exactly. And it's true. A lot of it is just the volume. But I've also done so many other mixes at this point that now I already have a set preset leading into it. So, thank you for coming and hanging out. Um, I don't know that I'll see you. Totally made that. I mean, I don't know that the number's accurate necessarily, but it's not far. I would say it's not far off. The volumes absolutely do matter. In a good mix, a lot of it is the volumes and the panning, and that's very true. When I used to make electronic music, I didn't realize I was doing it, but when I used to make electronic music, I made something like 4.5, 5 albums worth of electronic music back in the day, before I started like really recording stuff. And a lot of that stuff, I didn't realize it, but I was really heavily mixing it, increasing and decreasing volumes, adjusting and making sure stuff was all audible. I had no fucking idea. I had no idea I was doing it. And I'm not to say that I was doing a good job, but I just had no real reality of what it was that I was doing. Just that I wanted it to sound good. And in order to do that, I knew I had to turn the volume up on some things and turn it down on others. And as I grow as a as a mixer, as I get more into this stuff, I realize more and more that sometimes that's all it takes. Sometimes it takes more. But as I said, as we get closer to 7 o'clock, thank you again, Jeremy and Chris, if you happen to go back and watch this or whatever happens. Anyone who happened to sit by and watch this, thank you again for coming and watching. I will come back to this. Well, thank you very much, Jeremy. I'm going to come back to this at midnight. I don't know that I'll have you here, and that's totally fine. I suspect you'll be asleep, and if that is the case, sleep well. Change the name of your stream. Thank you. I will actually text myself as soon as I turn this all off to make sure that that's a thing. Because yes, I do need to do that. I didn't realize it was even set to that. I wonder if I'm sure there's a way to do it, but I just didn't realize. So, sleepy bye at that time, but I'll watch the archive video for sure. Thank you. I don't know how long it'll be because at that point I'll probably end up just kind of talking my way through this last little bit. But Control S, there it is. We've saved it. We're ready, boys. Up and adamant. Alrighty, thank you again. We will revisit this at midnight, and we'll go until it's done. Whoever comes along, whoever doesn't come along, will be there. Thank you, Jeremy, and God, I can't wait till you guys get that new stuff out, and hopefully we'll talk again soon, buddy. And then just tell Chris that I love him. Thanks you guys for coming on. All right, you have a good one there, buddy. And for anyone watching this in the archives, thanks for watching, and hope you have a good one.